Welcome back. All right. All right, good morning, everybody. Good morning, and welcome to the Board of County Commissioners meeting of August 27th, 2024. At this time, Madam Clerk, if you could do the roll call.
Commissioner Barnett,
Here.
Commissioner Baxter, Commissioner Bernard,
Here.
Vice Mayor Marino. Here. Mayor Sachs,
Here.
Commissioner Weiss,
Here.
Commissioner Woodward.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, let the record reflect that Commissioner Baxter is excused for the day, for the meeting. And Commissioner Bernard, if you could lead us in invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please rise if you're able to. Dear God, as we gather here today, we pray that we are ever mindful of opportunities to render your service to fellow citizens and to our community, keeping in mind always the enduring values of life, exerting our efforts in those areas, and on those things upon which future generations can be built with confidence. Let us continue to strive to make a better world. Amen. Thank you.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Very good. Good morning, everybody. If we could, are there any additions, deletions, substitutions to the agenda?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the board, there are no additions, deletions, or substitutions.
Thank you very much. And if we could have adoption of the agenda as presented. Do I see a, very good. First by the Vice Mayor, and a second by Commissioner Woodward. All those for, anybody opposed, see that it passes unanimously, 6-0. The consent agenda is found on pages 2 to 4. Is there anybody who would wish to pull anything from the consent agenda as presented?
Madam Mayor, I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended.
Okay. First by Commissioner Bernard, second by the Vice Mayor. All those for, anybody opposed, see that it passes unanimously, 6-0. All right. Moving right along to the regular agenda. And this is going to,
Is it special presentation?
on each one? Yeah, we're waiting for that. When that happens,
Okay.
it'll
she's not
happen.
here. Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve item 5A1 and 2.
Very good. You got that, Madam Clerk? All those for, anybody opposed? See that it passes unanimously. We'll do it. And she's not here yet. Very good. Okay, now we're going to begin the workshop part of our program today. And we're looking at 6A with regard to the FEMA FIRM map updates. We could have a staff presentation. Good morning. Good morning. Morning, staff. About a very important topic, which is water. Right ahead. And who's going to be presenting from the staff?
Excuse me. Good morning. I'll
Good
start us
morning.
off.
Very good, thank you.
For the record, I'm Wendy Carroll. I'm the Executive Director for the Planning, Zoning, and Building Department. With me today, Deputy County Administrator Patrick Rutter, Doug Weiss, the Palm Beach County Building Official and Floodplain Manager, as well as Paul Linton, the Water Resources Manager. We're here today to basically continue a conversation we had at the July 9th workshop. And so at the July 9th workshop, I'll give you a brief recap. On the left-hand side, we gave the board a update of the watershed management plan and the Lake Okeechobee Herbert Hoover Dike Rehabilitation Project and its potential impacts on the floodplain areas in that, and the flood zones in that area. We also discussed the status of the flood insurance rate maps for the eastern and riverine areas of the county, which included sharing the results of the scientific resolution panel findings and for the eastern areas. In addition, we reviewed our map update options, which includes the physical map revision process, as well as becoming a cooperating technical partner with FEMA. And we reviewed the community rating system program and some of its nuances. For today's presentation, on the right-hand side is a bit of an agenda. We'll provide you with the information concerning planning, zoning, and buildings public outreach initiatives concerning the flood maps, a CRS update, additional information concerning the proposed mapping efforts of the FEMA flood insurance rate maps, a LIDAR overview, and a discussion of a proposed plan moving forward. We will conclude with an overview of the current regulations on fill placement and the impact of unregulated fill. So last week, I emailed each of you a summary of our outreach campaign that we are working on, an open house schedule to provide our homeowners with information concerning the new FEMA maps that become effective December 20th of 2024. Planning, Zoning, and Building has partnered with Paul Linton, the League of Cities, and FEMA to coordinate these open houses in the month of September. It's my understanding that the impacted cities have been very responsive, and most will be participating in the open houses as a majority of the residents reside in those areas and municipalities. FEMA will also have a team of experts on hand to address issues such as insurance, individual map appeals, and more. For unincorporated Palm Beach County residents, we will have Doug Weiss and Paul Linton, as well as other team members in attendance to assist. We will be issuing a press advisory that will go out today, and then also one a few days prior to the first meeting, which is going to be held in Boynton Beach on 9/11. As you already know or may have known, we're also working on a social media campaign with the cities, our public affairs department, and our countywide PIOs. Also, Channel 20 is working on a flood risk PSA, and the water show, as we like to refer to it, will be airing on Channel 20 as well. That will be Doug Weiss and Paul Linton starring in that. I'd also like to publicly thank Richard Radcliffe at the League of Cities for helping coordinate these efforts in these open houses. They have been very, very helpful, as well as liaisons at FEMA, very cooperative with these open houses. So to recap a little bit on our community rating system program that we talked about at the workshop last time, we discussed that the building division's role in that support with emergency management and the CRS consultants in administering that program. After our last workshop, we consulted with public safety and emergency management, and they've advised us that they would prefer to come back at a later date with more information to you at a workshop to discuss their current CRS status and their future strategies. They're just completing concluding what excuse me, a 3-year audit that is currently underway, and they'll have the results of that as well to present to you at a later workshop. So now with those housekeeping items kind of finished up, I'll turn it over to Doug Weiss and Paul Linton to get into the meat of the matter.
Yeah, thank you for the record, Doug Weiss, building official, floodplain administrator. Article 18 updates are a little bit more labor intensive, so we're going to take some time to get those right. We're going to seek guidance from the commission on what features we need to include in that. We are required to do minor updates, so we may bring a minor update forward sooner. But it's not going to be the things we discussed at the last meeting, so we'll be seeking guidance on that. And again, we get mixed messages from FEMA on whether or not it's mandatory, but the maps are self-adopting, so we don't have to adopt the new maps. So it'll be presented to you guys for approval. It's going through FEMA right now, and we're waiting to see what FEMA has to say about it.
And Paul.
Okay. Next slide.
No, I guess I should do this.
All right, so I'm tasked with giving kind of an overview and summary of our firm map updates. We're here to seek your input on 3 different efforts for the updates. We have the Western Basin, which is around Lake Okeechobee, and those are the ones that were affected by the Herbert Dike recertification, and we're looking to update those to get a better and lower base flood elevation and to reduce insurance rates. For the other basin we're looking at is kind of the central one, which is on this map is east of the green line and west of the yellow line. Those are all South Florida water management basins. And then the last basin is the coastal/tidal basin. I prefer to call it tidal because I think when I think of the coast, I think of the beach. When I think of tidal, I think of it more inland, like Lake Worth Lagoon. So those are 3 areas, and we'll go over those in kind of detail along with our estimated budgets. Next slide. But we're going to start with is the LIDAR. The LIDAR is how we're going to efficiently and effectively get ground surface elevations, which are critical to estimating flooding, because that's where the water stacks up. And that has already been funded, and it'll be the first task that gets done. That's a separate funding from what we're going to talk about now. As previously discussed, we hope to do this as a cooperating technical partner, but if necessary, we'll move forward with the standard apply for and in the map revision process. Next slide, please. So the Western communities, as discussed, this is a smaller area, a simpler area, and we want to start with that and start developing that relationship and experience with the FEMA with this smaller area in order to get moving effectively for this area, because we think it could be done quicker, but also there'll be lessons learned that'll make us more efficient when we go to the other areas. And the estimated budget for this task is $500,000. Next slide, please. Okay, the South Florida basins are much larger and more complex, but the advantage is the South Florida Water District is already setting up a model for each of these basins, and we plan to use that model with some updates to perform the mapping. Otherwise, it would be much more expensive. This is going to be a 2-phase process, one where we evaluate the overall basins and basically select the basins which we think will have the biggest change in base flood elevations and start with them. And then once you get through the modeling, then you have to do the mapping process itself, which is the lion's share of the cost. You're talking about $500,000 to $1 million for the first phase, and then $6 million to $6.5 million for the second phase, depending upon how the work gets distributed between the 2 phases. And the last one is the title, and this is revisiting the title to examine what we thought was exceptionally high levels in Lake Worth Lagoon towards the south end. We want to take a 3-phase approach where we pay a consultant to run the most current version of the model and see if there's meaningful changes in that south end of the lagoon. We're expecting those to drop. Also concurrently, we're going to look at sea level rise scenarios, because the FEMA maps did not, and we do not want to be in the position where we recommend lower elevations only to have them change later on. So we're going to take that snapshot early, and then from that point either stop there if there's no meaningful change, or lay out a plan for evaluations for phase 2. Phase 2 is the big lion's share of the analysis, complex modeling, where you have storm surge, rain and wind all occurring at the same time. And then the final phase is the actual drawing of the maps. So we're going to take this approach incrementally. So we don't want to just jump in all at once. So we'll start with the Western communities and the lessons learned there. We will do the initial phase of the coastal concurrent with that, but there are other firm map efforts. We'll wait until we get the experience with the Western communities. And the time, just a note on time is variable depending upon how quickly the FEMA reviews and provides us input in that back and forth conversation. So all the time estimates here are just that, they're estimates. All right, and the objectives of this. We want a clear understanding of the flood risk and the flood maps. So we're looking for confirmation to move forward with this plan. It does sum up to about $9.5 million, which is a hefty amount. That's with non-envelope funds. We do not plan to initiate all those contracts at once. We will do an iterative process and an incremental process and keep you guys updated as we move through that process.
Okay, I'm going to update a little bit on the existing fill regulations, because fill was a topic at the last meeting. There's current language in the existing ordinance that requires limitations on fill outside engineered subdivisions. Now, what does that mean? That means the bulk of the county was declared a special flood hazard area back in 2004 or earlier. Since 1957, we had the 18 inches above the crown of the road. So basically, it limits what we do in the ordinance we have today to elevate the slab not more than 6 inches, what is required based on the South Florida Water Management District permit, based on the OSTDS permit, and other stuff. There's exemptions for septic mounts, if there's a raised septic mount, or if you excavate a pond, although ponds are much less popular these days, people don't like them because of the risks of, kids falling in and drowning. And you can do stem wall and backfill stem wall. You can place it inside the perimeter foundation walls to raise it. But the challenge is when you fill the whole lot, the water gets deeper. And there's an example. Paul, are you going to go through that, or am I supposed to go through this?
I'll be happy to go through it. So this is a little cartoon example of how things change. If you have the undeveloped lot with no house, no pads or anything, if a storm comes by and generates 12 inches of runoff, then you're going to go up 12 inches. Pretty simple. When you put the house pad fill on of that 3,000 square foot house and the associated edges, it rises a little over an inch. Not a big change. But if you were to fill the whole site 1 foot around that house in order to have drier and more area, you're going to end up going up an additional 8 inches. So that's a big change, especially when you consider that that's happening at that location, but also potentially runoffs going up other locations. But pretty well behaved for that size house, 3,000 square foot. The next example is going to show a little bit different and more impactful scenario. So we're talking about the ordinances for the development coverage. So this is the building coverage, in this example, it's a 20% limit. If they take that same 1 1/4 acre lot and you allow the maximum of the 20%, you go from a house with about 3,000 square feet to up to 11,000 square feet. The 11,000 square feet does not include driveways. It does not include the septic tank drain fields. So that changes the previous scenario, and your depth post the fill rises from 13 to 17 inches, a 4-inch change. And then on top of that, they fill in the remaining of the area with 12 inches of fill, you rise from 20 to 23 inches, which is starting to get kind of close to that 2-foot difference that we had above the road as our guidance for house pad elevations. But there's a little bit of buffer there because the roads are typically a little bit higher than lots, so I'm not going to overstate that. And then the last two here are going to be examples from the acreage and from Jupiter Farms. This is an older LiDAR, and you really can't see the resolution issues at this scale. It does tell you a good example. You can see the yellow brighter areas are the house pads. They are inferred by the perimeter of the house. And then you can see where the white arrows are, there is one lot that was filled pretty much edge to edge. There are also some other areas where Indian Trail bought lots and excavated for storage. But you can see the general change in ground surface elevation and how the lots change from site to site. And then for the next slide, Jupiter Farms, similar story, a little bit different overall elevations, but you can definitely see the older lots being smaller. You do see a little more ponds in this area.
Mr. Linton,
Yes,
I'm going to interrupt you for
sure,
just a minute.
absolutely.
Thank you. We have a question or comment by Vice Mayor.
Sure.
Sorry, I would have to pipe in, considering Jupiter Farms is in my district, and the acreage is in Commissioner Baxter's district, and a lot of the complaints that we're getting right now, the dirt wars, and I put that in air quotes because folks are coming in and clear-cutting their lots and then filling their lots totally and affecting the drainage. So what do we get to do about that? in relation to what you are presenting right now. Because the two previous slides where you were talking about the 2 inches, the 20 inches, as lay people up here, that went like this over my head. So I'd really like to know what we as a county can do to protect our folks, but in the meantime, we need to protect the folks that are in an existing structure when a new structure comes in. We need to protect them too, not just the new structure. So what is your proposition here? Does that make sense, what I just asked?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
I think I can answer that if you'd like. In better enforcement of Article 18, the provisions there, strict enforcement, and we're going to look at Article 18 in the rewrite we got to bring back for guidance, but there may be a discussion. We've had discussions initially in PZB about lot coverage limitations, enforcement of it. That has been kind of I don't want to say a moving target, but there's been some confusion over the past decade or two. At least since I've been here, there was a memo that said 40%, and we're talking 20% right now in the current ULDC. So there are issues there, and people want to use their property. How's the saying go? Highest and fullest use. I'm not a planner, but I don't want to deprive people of their use of their property. But by the same token, can they just fill it stem to stern? There's an impact. That water has got to go somewhere, and unfortunately, the districts do not have the capacity to store. So there has to be some on-site storage or, retention, and that's the challenge. And Paul's the engineer. He can tell you how close it has to be to actually function in a rain event, but it has to be really close. You got to be hydraulically connected, is the term?
Yes, it is. And these areas store water in the yard and eventually in the road before the house. As you lose storage, the water level from the same storm will get higher, which is the point you were making. And then unfortunately, the older houses that might be lower or in lower spots, they're the ones that are going to receive the impact from those changes. But as Doug said, I think there's some room and opportunity there for clarity on those issues so that everyone understands what the limits are and can use it to that point, but don't go beyond that point.
And what's really important is that new housing does not impact what's already there. It's not fair to those that are there, that because someone is doing something that they may not necessarily should be doing, the existing folks get impacted. And I do know that, I live in a community where there is a swale in the front yard, and water is supposed to capture in that area and along my driveway and eventually percolate down to the storm drain. Doesn't do that because those little pipes there that are 30, 40 years old are not working anymore. But suffice it to say, the house doesn't flood, but the front swale floods. But some houses don't because they've come in and they've raised their driveways, so they've impacted their neighbors. We have to put something in place that doesn't impact our neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Commissioner Weiss.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you talk about the difference between building on a foundation and building on a pad? Why don't we just put the new homes on a foundation so we don't use fill?
Well, thank you, sir. That is part of what we're talking about with the Article 18 update, alternate foundation plans. Currently, we do allow stem wall construction. You can bring in as much fill as you want inside the stem wall, and it's inside the footprint of the house. It doesn't extend out. As Paul's example shows, we are required to maintain level grade 10 feet outside the building in every direction. So if you go to 3,000 square foot, it makes it a lot bigger. And people are building bigger houses every day. So before you know it, and then they want a detached garage for their accessory structures, etc. So these things really, we're going to have to start forcing the design, and we historically have not done that. We need better language in Article 18. So that's what we're going to work on.
But why? My house was built 100 years ago. It's built on a foundation. All my neighbors' homes built around the same time, all built on foundations. And why don't they build on foundations anymore?
I think dirt is cheap.
But putting a
You're
foundation.
talking stem wall, right? That's the
cost for construction is much more. The fill cost is much less than putting the piles and other things to support it. We will probably try to get some information on that because it's a good perspective of the incremental cost from going from a fill of a slab versus a stem wall filled versus an elevated floor. I mean, we have two-story houses. I mean, clearly, you can support the second story. You can support the second story, and all the older houses do already have a raise. And I think it's clear that the message will try to get some cost differences so you can see the increment. FEMA has a brochure that goes over, and they talk about the cost savings, but they talk about the cost savings relative to the impacts, not the original cost. And when a person builds a house, it's all about the original cost.
So, I mean, most of the time, I mean, really, and to follow up with Vice Mayor's comment, is the issue really comes into play not when you're doing a development, a new community, but when you're infilling. And, I mean, there's not a lot of that left, and so why do we put...
You'd be surprised, sir.
Well,
Not to disagree,
it's
but yeah,
relative.
we get a lot of infill, and that's where the challenges are.
But you're right.
It's relative, right? Relative to the number of homes that are built versus the number that are not built.
Yeah, I don't have a number for that.
I looked at the Jupiter Farms and the other ones. There's only maybe 2 to 3% vacant lots, but there are. What we're seeing, and we're having conversations with the drainage district, is people repurchase, they go do additions, they have a different expectation of either addition or other uses on their property, or just, I want to dry our property. So they've come from other areas where the property was drier, and they're going to put the fill in to make it to get
Gotcha.
to.
And the new maps may drive a lot of knockdown and rebuilds. We've already seen it with the old maps. In 2017, there was a bunch of that occurred.
Very good. We're going to take a pause at this time while we take care of bringing in Commissioner Baxter into our conversation, because this is of importance to her district and the people of her district as well. And while we take this pause to take care of the technology, I'd like to recognize and welcome Congresswoman Shefferlis McCormick. If you could come forward, and thank you so much for honoring us with your presence today, Congresswoman. Right there.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, I'm excited to be here today. Anytime I get to be here with you, I'm always excited. I'm also very excited to see all of my hardworking team. And I say we're a team because we work so hard to make sure that we're taking care of Palm Beach. So I come today with pride, looking at all the faces of our great commissioners. I see you guys on the floor working hard all the time. So I'm so happy to stand here with you. And also with your county administrator, who comes to DC all the time to help us make sure that we can deliver for the community. But I'm even more excited to be here because I get to announce what we've been working on for the last year, which is appropriations. So today I'm happy to present a check for $2.25 million for housing.
I love it. Thank you very much.
Now, this funding is more than just a dollar amount. It is actually a lifeline for many families that live in Palm Beach County, from our educators and healthcare workers to our first responders and small business employees, the people who work the hardest to keep our country thriving, most importantly, our county thriving. But for too many people in the community, the dream of owning a home has become out of reach. High housing costs has left many hardworking individuals and families struggling to find a safe and affordable place to stay, especially in Palm Beach. That's why this program, like the Workforce Affordable Housing Development Project, which is crucial to our sustainability, is so imperative. The Workforce Affordable Housing Program ensures that homes are available at below market prices and that those who qualify to receive assistance with down payments and closing costs. This program increases the number of affordable housing units. It accelerates the timeline for bringing them to the market, ensuring more families can get the keys to their homes sooner. With today's funding, we are closing the gaps, ensuring that no one is left behind, and ensuring that everyone can thrive and live in the community of Palm Beach County successfully. And we all know that housing is not just a roof over your head, but it's also building stronger communities for everyone and safer communities. So thank you so much for partnering with us today. There's so many people I would like to thank who work for Palm Beach County who have really helped us get to this point where we can get such funding to our county. In our district, we have over 22 counties, well, 22 states and 2 counties. And this is one of the largest amounts we were able to give for counties. And I'm so happy to say that Palm Beach County deserves it. So thank you again, and I would like to do the check presentation right now.
Thank you so much. Before we have everybody, I'm going to have you come on up, Congresswoman, and we'll all accept the check on behalf of Palm Beach County. But I'd like to thank you personally, professionally, on behalf of the county for your commitment and your support in our efforts here in the county to increase the supply of affordable housing inventory. And this appropriation is going to help us so much. The demand for affordable housing continues to increase with the ongoing population growth in the area, along with the average wage, which continues to lag behind the amount of money people need to buy affordable housing. And the result is that our essential workers and service providers are basically being priced out of our area. So with this new commitment by your office from the federal government to us, will give us an opportunity for building affordable housing that we are hopeful that will help in easing the effect of this housing crisis. Thank you again, Congresswoman, on behalf of Palm Beach County and behalf of this county commission for your support in addressing and relieving our affordable housing crisis. With that, I'm sure you have the check with you.
I do.
That's good. Well, if you could come forward and we'll all stand together for a picture. Thank you
Mayor
again.
Sachs.
Is this the check? Let me see it, let me see it.
No, well,
Yeah, 2.250.
just for a short while.
That is awesome.
Nice to see you, Mayor Sachs. It's always an honor.
Just don't fall off.
So good.
Beautiful. Okay, back it.
Nice to see you.
Okay, so, how are we gonna do this? She's the boss? Absolutely, absolutely.
If what they're proposing, like a foundation raised floor, doesn't impact the storage, I don't think it needs to, they have to follow the ground coverage. If you wouldn't build a whole floor 2 feet up, I don't know, it doesn't bother me. It's good. Yeah.
Oh, she tells everybody.
The good news is we're not talking about actual action like on the coastal.
Okay.
But we do need to, you need to have a way for the water to get underneath.
We're dealing with labor men.
Yeah.
Raise that issue for Commissioner Marina, Vice Mayor. She's familiar with that. They want to fill that next to
Excellent.
raise
Thank you.
the current. Alternate foundation. Just put the garage down below.
Matt, where'd she go? This is be senator.
Well, we can provide some clarity on the coverage.
Okay, we can do that right now? Okay, okay, excellent. Okay. It is so wonderful to know we have friends in the federal government at Washington, and just so thankful to our Congresswoman Shefferlis McCormick for doing that for us today. It is a tremendous, tremendous asset, and we thank you so much. At this time, we have done the technology while we took this little pause, and we now have Commissioner Baxter on the phone with us. So I am going to make a finding of extraordinary circumstances so she can attend this meeting with us virtually.
Madam Mayor, I'd like
Yes.
to make a motion to approve Commissioner Baxter to appear because of exigent circumstances, please.
And we have a second, we have first by, you've got all of this is good, and the second by, all those for, anybody opposed? See that it passes 6-0. Okay, unanimously. And Commissioner Baxter, can you hear me? Okay, I'm sure you can. If you can't, just text us. In the meantime, we're going to proceed after the pause from this very comprehensive staff report on FEMA. Go right ahead, thank you.
Yeah, we were
We were
pretty much
pretty
the
much-
last slide.
yeah.
Although, you want to,
We just
one more,
wanted to-
and we're on the questions and direction from the board.
And today, we, just to clarify, the direction that we're seeking is the direction on how to proceed on the remapping efforts. I think we were pretty clear that the Herbert Hoover Dike remapping around Lake Okeechobee, you all were in agreement that we should move forward with that. We just wanted to confirm that you're also okay with us moving forward with the efforts to bring back RFPs on the other remapping efforts in the other two areas of the county. And then, like we said, with the Article 18 updates, we would love your input and feedback, but we would be presenting those ideas and suggestions at a later date.
We also got the clear direction on the getting more information on where we may have opportunities to make it clear for the fill, and so we don't have future impacts from recent fill, and a question about the information about different foundations in there, and that may have less impact, may have more cost. So we'll put that on our list too.
Very good. Commissioner Woodward, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. As far as the three, we have three areas, West Basin, South Florida Water Management, and Tidal Basin. I think we've already discussed the West Basin, that's the dike, that's pretty clear on. So the other two, you have multiple phases. So the phase one, would the phase two be contingent on what is found in phase one or what is determined after that for both of these? And the tidal basin has three phases, correct?
Right, so you got the exact intent was, we don't want to just commit ourselves to a whole lot of changes if we have the opportunity to say, well, there may be areas we don't want to model, but for the coastal basin, we may rerun the model and realize the changes aren't meaningful enough to warrant all that effort and cost. And so that's why we're doing it in that test phase, and then we'll move forward to the modeling and validation to make sure that you have the appropriate comfort from FEMA, for lack of a better phrase, that they buy into your modeling and all that before you go and generate the maps. You don't want to go forward 2 steps and backwards 5.
Right.
So for the tidal basin, the phase one and phase two would actually be needed before we could get the determination on whether or not the actual remodeling would need to be done?
No, this phase one will pretty much tell us right away that is there enough of a change between the FEMA model version they used and the new current model that it warrants changing the maps. Their rule of thumb is if it doesn't change by more than a half a foot, it's not worth it. We'd probably even be larger than that.
And that phase one, you're estimating would be $100,000 for the
Yes.
tidal basin? And then for the South Florida Water Management, the phase one, that one's significantly higher. It's just because it's a bigger area?
Correct,
Okay.
5 basins. And we'd be looking to prioritize and do the basins where we have probably the worst information or the highest flood risk.
Okay. All right, so that's all my questions for
At this time?
that part.
Sure.
Then if anybody else wanted to talk about that, I could come back to the impact of the fills.
Very
if
good.
you want.
This is a workshop, so it's good that we have an open discussion. Any commissioners have any questions at this time? I'm going to recognize Commissioner Weiss.
Thank you. I want to say August 8th, I sent over, and I sent this, I think, to Patrick in Virginia. It was, I found an article. Lee County they're able to get a CRS rating of a 5 in unincorporated Lee. Were you able to look into that and see how they're able to do that?
I downloaded their ordinance and took, I'm sorry.
Oh, good, thanks.
Yes, I downloaded their ordinance and took a look at what they were doing over there. But yes, they're doing some good things over there. The problem is, You know, if the execution isn't good, then they get caught with the things that happened. And I think that was part of the discussion with, you know, when FEMA came down, some of the stuff was not getting paid. But execution is part of it. But you can have a great ordinance if you don't execute it, you don't enforce it, you know, you can't get credit.
So, I mean, was there anything you were able to glean from what they were doing that might be helpful to us?
Yeah, we're looking, well,
I mean, if it's going to be coming back, that's fine. I just curious.
It's going to be coming back, and we currently have a 5. Our CRS rating is a 5. I think Lee County was
It's a 1.
a 2, right?
2, yeah.
A 2. So yes, and Mary is already in connection with the county and trying to find out some of those details, and we'll be bringing that back for you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anything we can do to expedite FEMA to responding a little quicker on this issue? Or
On the
nothing, a letter?
Yeah, that's an issue with FEMA, the watershed management plan. You guys are aware of that.
Yeah.
There's another receive and file coming in for another extension because the review time. We sent it out for review. Getting it back from FEMA is going to be several months, so that's part of the issue.
If there's anything you need from the county commission, let us know.
Thank you. And we're still looking into doing the cooperating technical partner. That would expedite things as well. So we're
Yeah,
Yeah,
anything
then
we
we
can
have
do.
better control.
right.
Right, because
Yeah.
it may be necessary, whatever we need to do. And I know Commissioner Woodward has some follow-up questions. Does anybody else wish to opine on this at this time? If not, I'm going to recognize again Commissioner Woodward.
Thank you, Mayor. So I do support, we already supported the West Basin and then the Phase 1 of the other two. But as far as the impact of the fill, when we discussed that, so is that going to be part of the future workshop where we address Article 18?
Yeah, we're seeking recommendations from the commission on how to move forward on that. We're going to try and, you know, it's a lot of moving parts. Some of it is CRS points, some of it is resiliency. I mean, I think Megan's back there. We're
She
trying
is.
to
I
make
see her
sure
back
our
there.
community is resilient. If we have a catastrophic storm event, we don't want it to be catastrophic. We want people to be able to stay in their homes. And if their homes are flooded, they can't stay in their homes. So that's part of this whole mission, but we can't just, you know, do a taking. We don't want to take away people's right to redevelop their property. So that's the whole thing is built into the FEMA model.
So as far as Article 18 is considered, though, I mean, that's we control that.
That's our
We
article.
control what parts of it we adopt, but there is a model ordinance developed by Florida Department of Emergency Management through FEMA that we have to adopt if we want to participate in the NFIP, if we want to make those things available in our community. So it's not like Doug just makes this stuff up. I don't make this stuff up. This is FEMA makes this stuff up, and Doug gets stuck with enforcing it. And they get mad at me when I talk like this, but this is the
It's the
reality.
truth.
I'm the tip of the sword.
Right, right.
I'm the one telling the person, you can't put an addition on your house. You can't do this renovation. You're going to have to elevate the building, or you're going to have to demolish.
So as far as what we are allowed to do, there are probably some options that we're not
Yes.
using at this point that you could bring back to us, especially when it comes to the fill, because you said currently we allow 20% of fill, which if that were utilized is significantly more than a 3,000 square foot house, especially in the acreage or some of these larger lots. Is there alternative fills that can be used that actually provide for draining? Is that an option, or is that?
You can talk about smaller footprints, taller buildings. You can do stem wall construction. Stem wall is where the footing is in the ground, and then the dirt fill is inside the foundation wall, and then you can go up multi-stories. There's one right now we're dealing with on Cardinal Lane, and I think the vice mayor is aware of this one, basically, but we're talking to the builder about doing this as a split level, where the garage will be right at grade pretty much, because there's a huge drainage problem on Cardinal Lane, and then, you know, he's gonna step up, and he's gonna build retaining walls and have a multi-story house. He's not happy about it, but we're holding his feet to the fire because he's having impact. So we're using the, how do I say this? We're using a clause that I don't like to use, which is impact of construction. I would rather have a particular code section I can point at, this is a violation, so it's a little bit tough if you get challenged on impact of construction. But that's where we're at. So far, guys working with us, so we'll see.
Well, so as far as, because when we do like a planned unit development, I mean, that entire,
Yeah, that's,
they have to account for drainage. They have to, and I get that these are individual private lots. They're not even part of an HOA or
Right.
any of this, right? So in fact, then it falls to us to make sure that that drainage is accounted for. Historical drainage matters. And if, even if it's a redevelopment, if they're building something and it goes higher, they're going to be flooding their neighbors. So really, it's on us to be the HOA, shall we say, for these areas.
yeah,
Is it a problem with enforcement, or is it not it's not clear?
it's a
Why
challenge.
is this happening?
Let me say, it's a challenge when there's no drainage in the street. And the example I just gave is Cardinal Lane. There's no drainage out there. There never has been. Was built in the 40s or the 50s. So they didn't put stormwater in back in the day. These are unrecorded plats. Now, if you come in with a new subdivision, you have drainage. So we have to figure out what historically has been the pattern and try and work through it. There are regulations about historical flow, but establishing that is not always easy, too.
So with the map that you've left up here, the Jupiter Farms map, it's a lot of colors. What is the blue where the water should be?
The blue is low level. Paul can clarify that. He did that LiDAR print.
Yeah, the
But
blue-
the red is high areas.
The blue is actually some of those old lots where they dug out the lake to get the fill for the house pads, and the house pads are the orange and yellowish one. And then the green is kind of the flat yard lot areas.
And how many of these areas are actually homes that are blue?
The blues are the low spots and lakes. They're not, the house
No
pads are the
homes that
orange.
Yeah, the red and
I
orange.
thought that was all homes, right?
Is that your area?
Yeah, the red,
I
the
think
red
there's only
dots,
like-
the orange dots are homes.
There may be 3 or 4 lots on that are not occupied.
Okay. So there's some of these that are barely red. Does that mean that those homes are more likely to be the ones that flood?
Yeah,
And the bright red are their higher neighbors?
Can't quite say that because they just may be small houses that were older and smaller and not necessarily that much lower, but typically the older houses, the requirements for the height, because the septic drain fields were a little bit lower than they are now. So they are probably, the smaller ones are, I would guess, a little bit lower, but just
So
as a guess.
when you bring back Article 18 to us, it's not just about fill, though. There's a number of
There's a lot of things.
regulations that are in there. So I think this is something that we
Oh, yeah.
definitely need to address and, find out what some best practices are out there, and then what we need to do to maybe tighten up the enforcement on this. And if they're coming in and filling, that's not even allowed to fill your entire lot. That's not currently allowed. And if that is happening, what recourse do we have for that?
We're currently using code enforcement in for vegetation removal and filling lots without permits. We require a permit, but if they come in and they bring us an engineered drainage plan showing how they're going to retain stormwater on the lot and not detrimentally impact the neighbors, we have to approve it. We don't have a lot of teeth. So, we're looking at Article 18. We need to build some teeth into that to do a little better job on the infill. That's where we're going to come back with.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
good. We have the attorney wants to say something, sir.
Brian Maher, Assistant County Attorney. Just briefly for clarification, the local amendments to the Florida Building Code does allow us to regulate off-site or construction that adversely affects off-site adjacent properties. So as Doug alluded to, the language is a little, it's loose, so it's can be a little, it's up to
Tighten up.
interpretation. So we do need stronger language in Article 18 to reinforce that enforcement.
That's it. Thank you for bringing that up. This is important. I know that we had this conversation about 2 years ago and about condominiums. And now we're in a bit of a crisis with regard to how quick so many folks have to have assessments in order to shore up the requirements that we've put on for condominiums. So I am glad that we're having this discussion today, and I agree with Commissioner Woodward on Article 18. Are there any other comments that the commissioners wish to make to give direction to staff? My only comment would be, when you come back to us, let's do this slowly, so that, I know the state legislature really hit us hard when it came to assessments on condominiums, and we're in a bit of a crisis right now with that. So, as we develop this, tighten up our enforcement on the code and the language, legal language on it as well, come back with us and we'll take a look at it so that we do this in a prudent way.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay? Thank you so much. Thank you. It was very comprehensive. Thank you. Looking forward to hearing back from you as well. Okay. We're going to move now on to Palm Tran Paratransit. If we could have the staff come on up for that. Yes. Oh my God, are there any cards on this issue? Okay, good. Greg, are there any cards on paratransit? Okay. Very good. Okay, good morning, gentlemen. Okay. We are going to, I've just been informed by staff that there is a message from Commissioner Baxter that would have been on the previous issue. So if we could hear from her at this time.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Commissioner.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Just for my own clarification, so are there any changes at this time being made, or is it coming back to us?
No. Okay, no. Commissioner, we did not make any changes, and they will be coming back with a report.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Okay. Thank you. We're going to go on to the next section, and I'm glad that you're joining us, Commissioner. Very good. Good morning, and we're ready for your report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners, Madam Administrator. Palm Tran team is here and back a couple months after we started this presentation to continue it, and thank you for your attention to that. We are here today to share with you a few thoughts about our paratransit service recommendations and then status of the RFP, and seeking some direction based on some of the comments from the Board of County Commissioners when we brought the previous RFP to you as we put that together. Joining me at the table, similar to last time, is Michael Blaylock. Thank you, Mr. Blaylock, for your work and leadership through this. Lynn Johnson. New at the table on this issue is Mr. Ivan Maldonado, our Executive Director of Palm Tran, and Lou Ferry from Palm Tran Connection. We wanted to just draw your attention to the PowerPoint that we'll kind of move through pretty quickly and share a few of these pieces with you. So,
we have been provided that as
yes,
well.
You all should have a
Good.
copy of that. So again, just going to give you a little bit of overview, connection efficiency project status, challenges, opportunities, some RFP modifications, and then seeking some board direction from you. On slide 3, this just kind of shares an overview of our services that we provide, the ADA, Transportation Disadvantage, and then DOS, our Division of Senior Services. Palm Tran is required to provide some of the paratransit services that we have under federal law, and it's also the designated, Palm Tran is the designated transportation coordinator for Palm Beach County. In that capacity, we provide some of the low-income status transportation to some of our customers throughout the county. We provide options as bus passes, paratransit services, and then also some subsidized fixed transit. And we also do DOS, working with the Division of Senior Services, where we provide this on their behalf, and that's partially funded by the Older American Act. On the next slide, we just wanted to point out who we serve. So just sharing with you, 60% of our combined paratransit trips are for people over the age of 60 years old. 78% of our paratransit trips are for elderly and disabled persons who meet the Americans with Disabilities Act criteria. And then 16% of our trips under the Transportation Disadvantaged program. Also, 27% of all of our paratransit trips are for medical reasons, and 15% are for nutritional reasons, as you see in some of the charts. A lot of other paratransit trips that we have are for employment, education, other activities of daily living. And how do we do this? On the next slide, under our paratransit services that we have now, we have 3 different modes. We have our PalmTran connection, which is one of our most visible that you see on our streets. And then also we have UServe and Lyft, which are an effort to make some of our transport a little bit more efficient and financially sustainable. Ambulatory riders that are registered for services for connection may opt to use one of these 3 services, either connection, UServe, or Lyft. And that's a really important part to note, because as we get into this, that choice lies with the rider, right? So they ultimately get that choice of what type of service they would like to and what they feel comfortable with. And you'll see who's able and who's not able to take advantage of some of those opportunities. Our service area on the next slide, you'll see, and these are just a snapshot. Obviously, all these cities are not all inclusive of all the cities we serve, but just roundabout, you can see some of the areas that we do provide the service. And we do provide that ADA requirement, as you see in that map, that lighter pink line that goes through there. That's 3/4 of a mile outside of the range of our fixed route, which is what we're required to provide under the federal government and under the ADA Act. We do that at a much broader level, and we'll get into a little more detail. And that's one of the major contributors that, provides that goes into some of the costs that's associated with the system and the demand that we have for paratransit today. Our ridership trends on the next slide on page 7. As you can see, and the one thing we really wanted to point out on the far right side of this, you see under ADA, TD, and our DOS trips, the year-over-year growth that we have under ADA, seeing about 10% of the growth, under TD, close to 18% growth, and our Division of Senior Services, about 10% growth that we have year. So the demand is obviously still there, and one that we're trying to meet. So I'm going to ask Ivan if he can take it from here and sort of take us through some of the connection efficiency projects, and then go over a little bit more of the PalmTran Connection Plus, which we briefly touched on at our last presentation. Ivan?
Thank you, and good morning.
Good morning.
Madam Mayor, Commissioners, Madam Administrator, everyone here today. I'm happy to be here today and have the opportunity to continue in this presentation. This is my 5th week or so at PalmTran, having worked at multiple transit systems, small, medium, large, having overseen paratransit service delivery and customer services, as well as human services in the past, has given me a great opportunity to be able to gauge the type of services that we provide to our customers. And with that said, I believe that we are in the right track. The team here has done a fantastic job to identify areas where we can improve services. And I think some of the initiatives that we have began to implement to meet the need, the continuous increase in demand for paratransit users, it's very promising. So with this presentation, I will start with slide number 8, and basically we'll be providing an overview of our enhanced eligibility assessment, overflow service options, non-ADA service delivery options, and our PalmTran Connection Plus, which is something that we somewhat have begun to implement, but we will continue to implement additional initiatives to enhance services and further reduce the cost of operations of paratransit services. So with regards to our eligibility determination, if you were to look at this slide, you can see in 2018 we had a high demand or a large number of applications of folks who were applying for the services, and we had a large number of applicants who were approved for paratransit services. You see that trend went down. I will, throughout this many years, of course, we had COVID. A lot of folks probably weren't riding, But then we saw a slight increase back in 2022 on the applications, and then 2023 in the number of applicants that were approved for services. But I will have to say that in 2024, you've seen now a slight decrease in the number of applicants as well as the number of applicants approved for paratransit services, and it has to do with increased efficiencies gained in the eligibility process by the team that manages the eligibility determination. That is better communications to customers, a better explanation of what ADA transportation is intended to be for, as well as just gaining better efficiency in the way that we do services. If we can go to the next slide. Back in July of last year, the team implemented non-ADA service alternatives. We began with UServe. UServe is a paratransit service option that is being used by many transit systems out there. And they basically provide similar services to what we provide through Connection, and that is that they meet the federal FDOT qualifications for the operators that they actually do the drug and alcohol background checks, random sampling. And as a result of that, the cost is slightly higher than using Lyft and Uber, and you will see this on this slide. But just from the start, and we began to use them in July 2023, and comparable to our average ADA, and I will have to explain the ADA, we're talking folks that cannot use Lyft and cannot use Uber and other non-ADA services. The cost was drastically reduced, and we're able to save approximately $12.39 per trip just by using UServe alone. When Lyft, we saw a further reduction in the cost of using Lyft, which we started in August 2023. And those savings are about $31.89. And of course, we're talking about services and alternatives that are provided to folks that are non-ADA users. That means that they do not need necessarily a wheelchair accessible vehicles to get to their destination. We do serve a lot of those folks that need services, but yet they do not need an ADA accessible vehicle. The next slide, number 11. So how do we compare as far as cost per service hour in comparison to our peers, not just in Florida, but throughout the nation? When you look at the green bar here, Brevard, the cost per service hours is $73.09 per service hours. Ours is $68.95. Pinellas Suncoast Transit, which they are, pretty much on top of the game when it comes to implemented initiatives to further reduce the cost of paratransit demand or paratransit ridership. They are at $85.37 per service hour. And then JTA, who's also very innovative when it comes to transportation, their cost per service hour is $116.81 per hour. I want to point out the Lynx service cost per hour is lower than ours. And folks would probably ask, how is that? Well, a couple of things that they do different than we do is they actually have an ADA plus services similar to what we are proposing to do in the near future. They operate in 3 counties, Orange, Osceola, and Brevard County. So they have certain restrictions that folks who are traveling into other counties, and they're able to do so, will pay a slightly higher rate to be able to travel along multiple counties. They restrict services to 3/4 miles of a fixed route for ADA users. They still provide TD transportation trips, but then they charge an added fare for folks that are traveling more than 10 miles per trip. And so that gives you an idea as to how they were able to gain better efficiencies when it comes to a reduced cost of service hour. Let's go to number 12. As far as our total funding, you will see that our total funding for 2023 was $44 million, so $44.9 million. $36.9 million of that was for ADA comparable complementary transportation provided to folks that cannot use any other type of services. And then we had $2.4 million that we paid for services provided to transportation disadvantage, and we receive additional fundings of $3.3 million to offset some of the costs for transportation disadvantage customers. And then we provide transportation to folks that are seniors who travel to senior service centers. And it basically, we receive an allocation of about $350,000, mainly from the Older Americans Act, and then we offset the total cost by $1.8 million. So that just gives you an idea as to the cost of paratransit services, challenges and opportunity. I would like to skip 13 and go straight to 14. As you could see, we gain a great deal of efficiencies when it comes to costs and the services that we're providing to folks that are non-ADA riders. And I want to preface this by saying that we want to take care of our customers, our citizens. We want to provide the same level of services that everyone in this county expect to receive. We want to respect their dignity. We want to provide a lot of flexibility and the ability for them to be able to make choices that meet and exceed their customer service demand. So when we look at this slide, we'll see that about 15% of our ADA users, or the folks that are registered to use Connection, are able to use non-ADA service alternatives such as U-Serve, Lyft, Uber, taxi cabs, and other types of options that are used for mobility on demand. Currently, about 8% of our users are using these two services, U-Serve and Lyft. The folks that are not able to use the system, either they have a disability that restricts them from using the system, they're under the age of 18, some of them require additional assistance, we call it that hand-to-hand, and some of them prefer not to use the system. Some of the challenges and opportunities. Challenges, of course, we have seen a tremendous growth in the ridership demand. That is nationwide. Every transit system that I worked at, we have seen that. Here is about 10%. In some of the transits, I apologize for that. I thought I turned that off, and I did. Somehow I'll turn it back on. Forgive me for that, please. So we're seeing that 10% increase in demand for paratransit services. We are providing services above the ADA requirements of 3/4 miles from a fixed route. Then we have the fact that we have been designated PalmTran as the Palm Beach County designated transportation coordinator by the state of Florida. And as a result of that, we provide transportation for folks that are transportation disadvantaged. And then we have the school impact, where we are providing transportation to students, both public schools and charter schools, which add additional impact into our system. I want to preface this by saying that in many other transit systems, you see that school systems typically provide their own transportation, and that is because they receive federal or state funding to provide that transportation. In our case, none of the funding actually comes to us. So here are some of the opportunities that we see. Mr. Boleron went through the map.
Excuse me, sir. Hold on. We have a question. We have a question. Commissioner Woodward? Or Commissioner Vice Mayor?
I think we all have the same
same
question as to
Okay.
why none of that money comes to us if we're transporting students.
Why isn't the school district paying?
Yeah, there's a few reasons currently, and we actually had some conversations, this past month actually with the superintendent of schools, and we have some upcoming that we, with him, we updated some information to him on the impacts of some of the charter schools. and what it is to provide some of the charter school service transportation. I mean, the one piece of it is that, first off, you know, the individuals that we transport in paratransit, and particularly school-aged kids, are eligible under ADA, right? So they are eligible under federal law to choose the type of service that they would like to provide. And because of the extent of the service that we do provide, when they choose PalmTran Connection, we have an obligation to do that under this. That being said, we do think and we do believe that some of those charter schools should be coming up with a better plan for transportation for their students, as opposed to just looking at public transport and PalmTran Connection as their option and alternative. And those have been a subject of a number of conversations we've had over the years with some of the in the charter school space, and it's one that we've brought back up again with the school district as of recently, and hope that, you know, we can get some additional support to work with our charter schools to, you know, come up with a better plan for transporting their kids.
Commissioner Bernard.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. So what can we do in terms of, like, having a discussion and for us to not have to have the taxpayers pay for this service, you know, going forward?
So Ms. Baker and I, we recently saw the superintendent again last week, and he's been putting together his team of transportation providers at the school district to sit down and have a conversation with us. Mr. Ferry updated in the past, you know, couple of months our ridership numbers to share with them, which we've shared with the school district. And really it's going to be, you know, starting to sit down individually with some of these charter schools and saying, look, you know, you guys should be providing a different type of, you know, transportation service for some of your students. They have different needs, and clearly they have needs that, you know, a bus operator, for example, in paratransit is not trained to do in terms of taking care of a number of kids that have varying ranges of challenges when they're on our vehicles. So it's an ongoing conversation we have, and I'd love to report back to you when we have that next meeting with them to just kind of see where we're at, and if we need to, you know, ramp up some of the conversations from that, we're certainly open to, and we'll share that with you. Okay.
Commissioner Weiss.
Thank you. Two things. On slide number 11, on the peer cost analysis, I know our costs are going up significantly. Where's everybody else in terms of their contracts? How many of them have been up? I would assume the higher ones are probably already updated. The ones that are on the right side of the scale there are probably contracts that have been in existence for a while. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's fair to assume. In Broward specifically, they're sort of in the same process that we are right now. So they're getting ready to enter into.
So really this is, it's informing, but it's not informative.
Now, the one thing about links, though, and some of the things that we're going to talk about in terms of the RFP and how we're going to structure this, because two of the areas when we came to the board with our last RFP, and the board said, look, there's a couple of areas that we want you to focus on, staff, in reworking this RFP. One of them was the number of providers. One of the issues was in sort of the flexibility that you give providers to address some cost savings and some unique opportunities to provide that service. And the third was pricing. I mean, and so when you look at a Lynx, for example, as Mr. Maldonado pointed out, you know, they've implemented some of those measures at Lynx that we're going to look at in this RFP to give some of those providers a little bit more flexibility. So I think while you are correct, Commissioner Weiss, that yes, some of these aren't all apple-to-apple comparisons, that's one where we can look at and say, well, in areas where they have put forward some of these innovations, they're kind of, you know, seeing prices that are a little bit on the lower end.
Okay, and I'm still not fully understanding what you were discussing regarding the students. So does every student qualify as ADA? Is that what you said?
No, but most of the larger charter schools that we provide paratransit services for, For example, some of the schools, we have several autism schools in our county, right? So when you look at sort of the top schools that we have in terms of paratransit, providing paratransit service, those students are the ones that qualify.
Okay, so they're truly qualified as ADA, because the way it came out, it sounded like every student qualified because they were students. So how do these other communities, how do they manage this? Why is this something different here than in other properties?
Louis, you want to address that?
So, thank you. Historically, here in Palm Beach County, we've been very liberal with our eligibility and things like that. So the schools look at it as it's the parents' responsibility to get the student to the school and not for them to provide the transportation. So when we have the extensive ADA service that we have, they apply for our service. It's within our ADA core area, so they choose to take Palm Train Connection and the school doesn't provide transportation. So I've seen it where I was at like the L school up in Jupiter. Before they opened, I was there, and the principal stood up and said, don't worry about it, we're changing from the Renaissance Center right near down here in West Palm Beach, and we're just going to go up to L's. Just use Palm Train Connection, it's fine, they'll take it. And I stood up and said, no, wait, you can't do that. But they can, because they qualify for Palm Train Connection, and the parents choose to put their autistic child on our bus instead of driving them. And that's our struggle. We've tried to talk to the schools. The schools say it's the parents' responsibility to get them to the school, and the parents say we don't have any other way to bring them except for using Palm Train Connection.
I still don't understand, though, because other communities have to have similar populations like we have.
Other communities have taken a stronger stance.
What do you mean when you say stronger stance? Because if they qualify, they qualify.
They do, but their school district has been more supportive in pushing that transportation plan. Each school is supposed to have a transportation plan, and their transportation plan does not include the Palm Train Connection side of it.
And the state and provides funding for transportation, including for charter schools?
Yes.
That's what we understand, yes.
So Commissioner, if I may, Commissioner Weiss, I don't think it's an issue of eligibility. I think it's an issue of payment. In other words, all the children could be eligible. We're not questioning eligibility. What we are questioning is, where does the money go? It appears that the money goes to the school district and not to the county to pay for paratransit. Is that correct?
That is
work with
correct,
Commissioner Weiss?
Mayor, that the many often transit public school districts as well as charter schools, they do provide transportation. They purchase bus passes. They often provide transportation to especially if they are severely physically disabled and require that extra level of care, someone that provide additional supervision. So as Mr. Liu just mentioned, a lot of it is the stance on the transit agency or the county, if it's a municipal transit such as ours. When I was executive director of Star Metro in Tallahassee, we began to see the same trends. So as executive director, I was given the direction to reach out to the school board and the charter companies, and even working with the state to help in that process, because there's funding available for them to provide the transportation. And we don't have any problems providing that level of transportation, but sometimes they require specialized care that our operators are not capable to provide. We make certain expectations that we tell an individual or a family member that they might have to have a personal care attendant in some instances, but sometimes the level of care that they require when you're transporting multiple students who are severely physically disabled, it can become a constraint on the transit system. It poses a safety issue for operators and that sort of thing. So that dialogue is essential. And as Mr. Bonlaron mentioned earlier, those conversations are happening behind back door have been informed that this is happening, and we will continue to work in that direction to make sure that we are able to find whatever funding we're able to do to offset our increasing costs and demand.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Woodward, and then Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for bringing up the driver's experience in this because, as you know, you had to help me a few months ago with a student who, because we have cameras on our buses, we know exactly what happened, but our drivers are the only adults sometimes on the bus with multiple children who have special needs. And, you know, as an aunt of multiple special needs nephews who live in another state, you know, those buses have adults in the back of the bus so that the driver can focus on driving safely and not managing what's happening behind him or her. And that's a concern that I've had with why the school district and the charter schools aren't more proactive and at least having an adult. If they're going to use this service and not pay us for it, they should have an adult on the bus with these children. It's not our driver's responsibility. We want them to be safe on the road and not have accidents with drivers and pedestrians not having to deal with what's in the back of the bus. So that's a big concern. The cost, of course, is a big concern. If we're you know, and you know, we're having them clog up the roads really with multiple buses going into these same areas. Anyone who's ever got stuck in a school line, you know what happens there. And just, is this also because we are countywide? If we were to cut back to the 3/4 of a mile, this ADA requirement that we have, how much of that would alleviate the school impact? Do you know?
So I think that would make. That would definitely, sorry, good morning, commissioners. That would definitely lessen the impact, the fiscal impact that we're seeing, because currently we can take these students all over the county. So adding those additional restrictions would aid in the cost impact. But I wanted to also clarify as far as the funding piece. So the county is getting anything that we are eligible for as far as funding for paratransit, but there are different allocations that may go to the school district. And so we are not necessarily missing out on our allocations from the state or the federal government. They just may have additional funding sources available to the school district and to the charter schools that they may not be using for those purposes. Because I don't have specifics as to what is specifically allocated to them. I can't speak to that or what they're receiving. But I wanted to clarify that point. It's just there are certain funding sources that are specifically, as you know, for local governments, for school district, and for the charter schools as well.
Good. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. And,
That actually helps with my question. Thank you. One, do we really have an understanding of how many students are using our service? Because then we really have an understanding of what it's costing us, and then where is that cost coming from, and how do we make sure that we're not paying something that the school district actually can pay for more easily than we can? That's a threefold question, but I think you can answer that for me.
Yeah, the answer is yes. We have a very good understanding and idea of who our riders are in this service.
So the percentage of students would be?
Well, we can tell you that we average about 245 trips per weekday for schools that we do. Okay. And we can tell you, where we pick up and where we drop off every rider on paratransit. We know our top 10 schools that we pick up and drop off at, and every person that gets on and off of that bus who's eligible to ride that bus. So it's a pretty significant number. I mean, it's large, but we know to the number how many there are and where they're going.
Okay, so continuing on with that, are there, and I'm looking at page 12 that shows local funding, state funding. State funding is not very much of this. So for whatever we're supplying for the school children that are in need of this particular service, are we getting other dollars for that other than our taxpayer dollars?
No. So all of the funding that you see here, mostly coming from the state, is all that we are getting for funding. We do have a small portion that that we get from the federal government as part of our annual allocation from the FTA, but outside of what you're seeing here, that's it. So any funding that is meant for the school district, charter schools, that is not being transferred over to us for providing this service.
And sadly, I knew the answer to that question, but I wanted it to be said, because if the school district gets funding for this particular service and then they're not remitting it to the county, they're double dipping. We should be getting either reimbursed or they should be supplying the service. And while it may sound cruel that we're spending so much time on this, it's not cruel. What we're trying to do is figure out the right funding source for this, because we offer a Mercedes service when really we're obligated to offer a Volkswagen service. And it's very hard to cut back on service without folks feeling that we're doing something inappropriate. But in this instance, if the school district is getting money to move their students around, and this is supposed to be part of it, the school district should be paying this service. Thank you.
All right, so let's do this. I'm gonna back up what Vice Mayor Marino and Commissioner Woodward and Commissioner Weiss has stated. Would you let us know, all of us, how we can inform the school district that the monies that they are receiving need to come to the county in terms of transportation? Okay.
We can, and
Thank
we
you.
will update you all on the status of those conversations that the administrator and I are having with PomTrans staff and the school district on this issue.
And I don't want to know, I don't need to know about the status of the economy. I want to know if and when they're going to pay. So we really need to look at the numbers, how much they owe us, and then when the money can be allocated to the county. I don't need to know a status of conversations. So go on while these kids are in college, you know. So let's, if you could, Mr. Bonlar, I appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, let's move on.
Just to continue on with the presentation, on page 17 of your slide deck, we wanted to continue on with just the opportunities that we have with Connection Plus before going on to the RFP and scope of that discussion. Ivan?
Certainly. As you can see from this presentation, you see the area that we cover on the left, and the purplish color is areas outside of our 3/4 miles ADA required transportation. The one in the middle shows our 3/4 mile buffer areas that we are required as per the Americans with Disabilities Act to provide comparable transportation to our fixed route services or complementary transportation. And then if you see on the right is the actual services that we provide is a very large area. And I'm going to go to the next slide just to talk some more about this. I would say that Connection Plus alternatives like UServe, Lyft, Uber, taxis will provide services outside the ADA area for ambulatory riders. So what we're proposing to look forward in the future is to provide, I would say, greater, more efficient services, cost-effective services to folks that are living or travel outside that 3/4 mile, but also this option being available to those that are able to use the system or every initiative that we implement. So it's Mr. Bolnaran mentioned earlier, it's by choice. It's intended to provide more flexibility, a greater level of independence, and also reduce the cost of this continuous increase in demand. ADI customers who prefer to use these services will still pay the same fare. In the near future, we plan to include the use of accessible ADA taxi cabs for non-ambulatory users. Right now, UServe and Lyft do not provide the services, but we're looking into those options there. On slide 19, if I may, So the Connection Plus program will provide more flexible services, will eliminate restrictions on trip negotiations for those folks traveling outside the three-quarter mile area, particularly folks that are under the Transportation Disadvantage Program. It would allow us to establish trip negotiations for pickup and drop-off windows for non-ADA users, and will lessen demand on during peak hours of services. And if I may explain this, if you have, say, 2,000 customers requesting to be picked up during peak hours at the same time, in ADA transportation is intended to provide transportation for folks who suffer a physical or cognitive disability. What happens is it literally loads the system, so now it affects your on-time performance, customer services, and affects services to folks that are ADA paratransit dependent. So what we are proposing to do is to actually create other alternatives to those folks that are able to use a non-ADA option, still give them the same level of service that we have been providing, that they're accustomed to receive, and ultimately will give us a level of control in the manner that we provide services to those to our citizens. It would also allow trip limits, prioritization, and would eliminate restrictions on pricing for TD funding trips, particularly trips where users may be able to connect to the fixed route system to complete their commutes. And since these trips are non-ADA trips, they do not have to be comparable to the fixed size schedule. That means that you may negotiate and adjust the schedule as needed to get them to their destination, and you're not bound by the restrictions of ADA transportation. And then on slide number 20, I will pass it to Assistant County Administrator Todd Bellner, who will continue this section of the presentation.
So to just highlight the components of the RFP, where we were, what we brought to the BCC, and where we're proposing that we go forward in soliciting your feedback. It was clear at our meeting with the Board of County Commissioners when we brought our last RFP proposal, not RFP proposal, but our selection from that RFP, that the board made it clear that we wanted to look at multiple providers instead of a single provider. So as part of the RFP that we will draft, it will include looking at multiple providers instead of a single provider to do that service countywide. Also, we talked a lot about cost. We talked a lot about cost today. We talked about it then as well. And some of the things that we're going to do in the new RFP is to invite our vendors to offer saving proposals for ADA and for Connection Plus that Mr. Maldonado just kind of outlined for you with TD and DOS on how we might be able to effectively do that, work through some of those cost savings. Also part of that, and I want to make sure we get this out there, technology is very key right now in the world of paratransit and providing these kinds of services. And things like our scheduling programs and the software that we use and those kinds of things. We have taken a good hard look since our last conversation with you to look at that software and challenging ourselves to see how we can be more efficient on the scheduling side of it and upgrade some of that technology. And to that end also, as we look at our evaluation points for this particular RFP, we will increase some of those evaluation points that we allow for price and approach, and kind of focusing on how some of those providers are going to look at doing this holistically. We also will probably create a baseline of the kind of service that we want to be provided, and then allow for a little bit of creativity with supplementals and other ways that those providers can then give us information that we can sort of score on an apples to apples comparison. One issue that came up a lot in the last several RFPs was the property for vehicles and leasing a sizable piece of property for our providers to have their buses on and to be able to operate out of. And a number of providers were getting tripped up by that. We've been working very closely with our facilities department on identifying a facility to long-term lease so we can take that potentially out of that contract, save us some money over the long term with a more centralized facility that can be used by multiple providers. And the other piece of that is on the fuel side of this, there's an opportunity potentially for savings within the contract on the fuel and how we provide that for those particular vehicles. I also wanted to point out that, where we talked about inviting vendors for cost savings, I think the key word here is flexibility. And we've been a little bit rigid, I think, in some of our contracts that we've had in the past. And in this upcoming RFP, we're going to look to provide some flexibility in the overall contract that we have. So when we have these longer-term contracts of 5 years with renewals, a lot can change in that period of time, and it will give us more flexibility on the administration side to adapt to that with flexibility drafted into that particular contract. So those are a few of the items that we have been able to identify. I mean, obviously there's some fixed costs that we know that are expensive in providing this service. Labor is a big component of this. Insurance, as we continue to look at, providing this type of coverage, is a big number as well. And so we are mindful of that and keeping our eyes on that. But that's why we need to look at some of those other areas. The last thing I wanted to point out, just on the non-dedicated versus dedicated service, because that's a little bit confusing sometimes to point that out there. In the last RFP, we put in there a 20% goal for non-dedicated service. So we talked about that slide with the 15% who are able and the 85% who are not able to make that choice to use some of these other options. We drafted in a goal of 20% to try to see if we can work to get to that number of 20%. Where some of our providers came in last time, where some of them far exceeded that, beyond where we thought we were capable of being able to get to, which represented tremendous cost savings on their side of it, but in reality, we didn't know that we were capable of getting there. So that number and that flexibility in that number is going to help drive some of those cost savings, and how innovative and creative some of our providers can get while still providing the quality service that we're demanding will also be a factor, I think, in bringing some of that overall cost down. So the last slide, I think I shared with you just our scoring criteria. The two that I wanted to point out were just project approach and startup plan, where we've increased some points there. And then at the end on price proposal, to show that we were going to put a little bit more emphasis on both of those two areas based on some of the feedback that we got from the board at our previous meeting. And Madam Mayor, Commissioners, that is our presentation for you today, and certainly any feedback that you would like to provide us, we're happy to take that and include that. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a very good presentation. I'd like to recognize the Vice Mayor at this time.
So Todd, when you talk about project approach and startup plan, this is the thinking outside the box question?
Correct.
And we definitely need more innovation. And when you hear also maintenance plan and facility, how does that increase or decrease depending on if we're supplying the facility and they're leasing it?
Well, one thing I would just point out, I mean, the maintenance plan is an incredibly important part of this contract because our providers are responsible for the maintenance of those vehicles from the time they get it to the time that they turn it back. We may, depending on the facility component and whether or not we are able to land the facility component of this, be able to adjust that point number slightly on the facility side. But really, the question is always about, do they meet the minimum criteria for the facility? And I can tell you the first RFP that we went out to under this a couple years ago, none of the providers that really came back and met the need for the facility that we were looking for. So that's why we've been thinking about this a little bit more. So that number could change slightly depending on whether we get that under contract.
So that's another cost that's going to be borne by the county, is the facility itself.
Well, it's a cost that's currently borne by the county because we are reimbursing our providers for the cost of that.
Right.
But the savings that we can bear is if, for example, a provider may only be able to lock in a 5-year deal for a facility because that's the extent of the contract that they know they're entering into. Whereas the county knows that we have a longer term need on this, so we could look at a 15 or 20-year lease and negotiate a much better deal and create a more constant on that number instead of some of the fluctuations that we're seeing with some of our providers.
Okay, I may have more questions, but I'm going to go ahead and...
That's quite all right. It's a workshop. Commissioner Woodward.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you go on slide 14? We have the U-Serve and the lift.
You want a cookie?
Are these services, one or both, able to actually do full ADA service?
Lou, did you want to answer that one?
Sure. So UServe is using Uber, Lyft type vehicles, so it's people just like Uber and Lyft. The thing is that they're compliant with the drug and alcohol testing, the background checks, things like that, and they provide door-to-door transportation. So UServe is similar to Palm Train Connection, but just not using our buses. So it's a TNC model that Uber.
So what is it that our Palm Train Connection buses do that UServe does not?
We have wheelchair accessibility.
Okay.
The wheelchair accessibility, and we're level 2 background check too, to make sure we do the Division of Senior Services, and we can take our seniors. So the level 2 background goes a little further, but that's the difference. It's really the mobility differences and how we do that. Yeah.
Because we have, it's showing on this chart, only 15% are able to use that service. So I see that the disability restricted, would that be the wheelchair accessibility part of it?
Mostly mentally disabled. They don't have the cognitive ability to. So UServe, you have to have the app. They text you to let you know that you're looking for a white Honda Civic. You're looking for a gentleman named Jim, and they have to have that cognitive ability to find that vehicle and utilize it in that manner.
Okay.
We have mental disabilities, also disability restrictions as far as. We have people, seniors that can't crouch down and get into cars, and they have to use our paratransit vehicles or the mobility aids. They have wheelchairs and things like that. So it's really that disability focus.
Okay. And the last one that's listed here is refused or opted out.
Right. So right now, because UServe and Lyft do not have the ability for wheelchair accessibility, according to the FDA, the Federal Transit Administration, and the ADA law, we have to offer equitable service to everyone that we provide service to, which means all of us could probably get on Uber, and an Uber can be downstairs in 7 minutes. If you're in a wheelchair.
Okay, but I'm curious about that category because disability restricted would cover that. Refused or opted out, that's a different answer.
So yes, and the refuse or opt out is because of that equitable part where we can't force people to use it. So they can say no to it. I want to take Palm Train Connection. They're just not comfortable. Someone that's visually impaired is not comfortable riding a TNC or Uber or Lyft because they feel as though we had it happen 2 days ago. Someone that was visually impaired used a Lyft operator. The operator took them 3 minutes away from where they were supposed to be and wanted to drop them off and just leave them in the middle of nowhere. And it happened. And then she had to call the police and all that. Mm-hmm. That's different than Palm Train Connection. They can call Palm Train Connection. We can make sure we know where the vehicle is. So the trust in that is not quite there either, and we can't force them to use it because of that equitable part of it.
Is there a part where we can require UServe or Lyft to do better? Not drop someone off 3 minutes away that can't see?
We can, and we remove that driver from the system, from our system. But I have several people that are visually impaired. They don't trust that portion. There's seniors that just say, I don't want that. Or, I don't want my father on that. I'm going to refuse that. Or I don't want my child on that. 20 years old child, whatever. I don't want them on that. Mm-hmm. And right now they can choose to do that, especially with ADA. With so much being ADA right now, they can refuse that type of service.
So,
with Connection Plus, we could look at it as something different, where we can say, this is what we're offering you. ADA, it's a little bit different.
So, Commissioner, one of the things that I wanted just to add to what Lou just mentioned was that we are having those conversations with UServe nationwide, and the stance from the FTA and Florida Department of Transportation has been that they want to provide the services to customer by choice. So they are making that decision whether they want to use an ADA accessible vehicle and or one that is non-ADA accessible. And that's why we have identified that 15% of those folks who could use the service, but we're also looking at the possibilities of adding wheelchair accessible vehicles such as taxis. We're having conversation, Mr. Blaylock had conversation with the folks at UServe to see if they can provide that same level of services also for those folks who may require a wheelchair, but they have the ability to access an app and schedule those trips as well.
So this information, it will be part of the information that goes out in the RFP. So when they're coming back with their creative proposals, they'll know this and know that trust is a current hurdle that they'll have to get over, and that's something whoever they contract with will need to address. Correct?
Yeah, and you know, what we did in the last RFP was we set sort of a goal of what we were striving to in terms of the ability to use these other kinds of services. And when we sit down and when we have our industry meeting, because you know there are going to be differences in this RFP than before, and we'll lay a number of those things out there. And it'll be an opportunity for questions and answers, and we'll be able to kind of lay out some of those expectations that providers should have going into this, some of the limitations that we look at, but also give them some of the ability creatively to you know, submit. But you know, we as those that will be evaluating it too, you know, will be able to, you know, offer that in the evaluation process as well, what we see.
Okay. And my last question
Go right
is,
ahead.
as this RFP is going out, is it going out to do this, what did you call it, Connection Plus program? Is that what we're offering?
Yeah, so that Connection Plus program is one that, as part of that flexibility and part of that creativity, that's one of those that we went back after the board said, hey, you know, look at some areas where you might be able to provide some cost savings while still providing, you know, that service. That's one of those areas that we expect, and what we've heard from some of the industry of an area, and this has been implemented in other locations, so it's not, you know, new that we're doing, but is one that we think will be able to, you know, provide some of that flexibility.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Woodward. Commissioner Barnett, did you want to say something? Go right ahead, sir.
Thank you. It was mostly answered already by Ivan. Thank you. It had to do with UServe, Lyft, and the vehicles that they're using, setting aside those patients who may have mental health issues or visual impairments, but for our older seniors, older citizens who may not be able to crouch down into the back of a Toyota Corolla. You said you're having conversations. Can you elaborate on conversations that you may be having with UServe or Lyft in order to see if they might be able to provide more accessible vehicles that our seniors would be able to use? Like minivans. I've seen those vans that have the ability to transport wheelchairs.
Right.
Commissioner, I have, Michael Blaylock, I have spoken with the president of UServe as we have examined different models across the country. And they're another version of Lyft, but their particular drivers are trained and certified. And what we usually see with UServe drivers, these are people who really want to do this. They want to take grandmother to the store. They want to take granddaddy to the doctor. So it's a different core of people in terms of that provide that level of service. But I have spoken with him, the president, and I have put our local representative for UServe to meet with the staff, and they're starting the conversations now. More importantly, we're in a position now we can start looking at shifting some of those trips that are being provided by our vehicles into the UServe vehicles. And they have assured, and I have looked at other models, where they are providing wheelchair accessible vehicles under their particular model. And so that's one of the areas that we're exploring particularly in expanding this Connection Plus version of this RFP process. So yes, it's happening.
All right. There are no other questions at this time. We do have a card. Okay. Commissioner Weiss?
Yes, and we're going to hear from Mr. Drew Merritt.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm really happy with Ivan. I'm glad I came here today to meet Ivan. Also, I think he's doing great so far. And as far as I'm happy with the multiple vendors, it should be a lot easier. I want to get this RFP out. You know, I think with the one vendor thing, it's a very, very hard thing because there's a lot of fighting with MV and stuff like that. And I like UServe and the Lyft, and I think it's a really good program. I want them to keep it, and I get to where I'm going. I have not been late for work for any appointments, actually. And I think that I really wish that they would have more school buses. I mean, I know I lived in Massachusetts, and I went to a special ed school and they bussed me out and they had their own van, so I think you really need to get more special ed school buses. I've been saying that for a long time. And I just hope you continue with the lift services and the USERV and continue and hopefully same day with USERV and I hope it continues because I don't like being late and I don't like going straight. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for that. Are there any other comments or questions by the board? Seeing none. Todd, I think you have a good direction.
On the right track. Thank you.
Right? And with that, I want to thank you. You provide a very important service to our children and to the parents and to all the people here. And we want to make sure that you continue. We look forward to receiving that report from you as to additional sources of income that we could have for budgeting our paratransit for our school children. Thank you again.
Thank you
for your work.
feedback. I appreciate
Thank you. Okay. We're going to move on to the very last part of
Actually, I do want to.
on our workshops. And if I can find my paper, let me borrow your agenda if I could. Here it is, if I could. If I could have the staff come up on, thank you, on 6C, Emergency Medical Services, Secondary Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity, COPCN, Update, Public Safety. So we have Stephanie here. Very good. We have the lights already on, Vice Mayor. Commissioner Bernard.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Before staff makes a presentation, based on the information that I've gathered in all the meetings that I've had, I really want to know what can we do to basically terminate our agreement with AMR and medics, and how quickly can we terminate it, and how do we move forward in terms of bringing new providers in Palm Beach County?
So to that question specifically, we have a license that has been issued to 3 providers in Palm Beach County, AMR Medics and the Healthcare District. Within the ordinance that we have, it's prescribed, what needs to occur, what are the services that are being provided, and then if there are deficiencies, how we go about, remedying those deficiencies that might exist in there. I would point out, and so there's a process for doing that. And so I don't know that that's an immediate process. It's one where, those deficiencies are identified, they're reported, of which we have not received or been reported deficiencies on that as of this date. But when we get those, staff goes through that process with the providers to try to remedy that, and they're prescribed certain timeframes in order to correct those within the agreements that we have and within the ordinance that we put forward. So I don't know that there's a way to do it from an immediate perspective, and maybe Stephanie can kind of add a little bit to that.
Yeah, and so there would have to be cause by which we would need to terminate their contract. There are opportunities in the ordinance for us to suspend or revoke a license, but I would lean heavily on our attorneys to provide guidance on what opportunities we have for that. I know that if we were to terminate any contract, we do not have an alternative option in place right now, and we would have to look to revising the ordinance to open that up. I do have the ability as the administrator to put a remedial action in place under emergency powers. So not to put the spotlight on our attorney, but this, in my opinion, is a legal question. So if she's allowed to.
Would you like to hear from the attorney?
Yes, good
Commissioner
morning.
Bernard, would you like to hear from the attorney? Go right ahead. Identify yourself, please. I don't know who you are.
I would concur with what they said. I think that
Could you state your name, please?
I'm sorry, Sharon Burrows for the Palm Beach County Attorney's Office.
Very good. Thank you.
I think that we would know, there's a process in the ordinance that sets forth how we have to cite them for violations, and then the enforcement process that's set forth in the ordinance. I think we would need to follow that.
Thank you very much, Madam Attorney. In regards to how do we, if, let's say there's a process, but how do we can we open it up and bring in additional providers? And how quickly can we bring those additional providers if we're not going to terminate that the COPC and currently for AMR and medics?
If I may, Mayor, turn to a slide that provides a timeline that we put together, a very aggressive timeline of the steps and actions that need to take place in order to do what Commissioner Bernard has asked.
Would Commissioner Bernard, Commissioner Bernard, just one second, just a second, let's take a pause. Commissioner Bernard, would you like to hear the presentation first, or would you like to go immediately to that slide that's part of the presentation?
I think the Vice Mayor's got some questions, so I'd love to hear her questions, and then so now we can kind of like figure out what's the best way.
Okay. Then Vice Mayor Marino?
I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to describe a personal experience, and I'm going to remind folks on the dais that this was 3 years ago. This was a process we went through. I was on the losing side when I said we should bring in other providers. And today I am absolutely adamant about that. And I will tell you why, because I had met with staff, and staff was sort of, I'll let staff explain where their position was. My position was, we need more providers, but if staff thinks it's better that we wait, then we wait, because I always like to take staff's side. My father, as you all heard me say last week, his 92nd birthday was Sunday. And on Sunday, my dad fell and severely hit his head. And we called 911, and 911 took him from our home to Jupiter Medical Center. Jupiter Medical Center, after doing some of the tests, says your dad has a brain injury and a trauma, and he needs to go to St. Mary's. And we need to call a transport. Now, it's not 911, it is a transport. It's a trauma transport, but it's a transport. And that'll take about an hour. Transport was there, and it was AMR, and it was about an hour. And my mom, I'm sorry, I'm a little shaky. My mom rode in the ambulance with them, and I rode behind. There was one paramedic and one driver. That's all that was on the transport, 2 folks. One paramedic, one driver. The paramedic sat in back with my dad and my mom. Remember, my mom's 89. She crawled up into the back of the ambulance. The paramedic said to the driver, "Be careful." Now, meanwhile, the lights and sirens are on, and she's going fast. And my mom says, "Why would you tell her to be careful? Isn't that, don't you take that for granted?" And then my mom looked up, and the paramedic had one hand on the wheel, and in the other hand, she was holding her cell phone, looking at a map for traffic. That's disgraceful. When we talk about texting and driving and distracted drivers, I see mouths open in the audience. This is true. This is what happened this weekend. My father's life was hanging in the balance by somebody driving an ambulance with its lights, its sirens, and going fast with a distracted driver. That is unacceptable, no matter whether you're 92 years old, you're 15 years old, or you're 1 year old. I cannot believe, I have to say this in an open forum, that an ambulance was not equipped with the right equipment. So I don't care what we do today, as long as it is to adding additional providers, because that is unacceptable service for any person that we are serving in this county. So with that, I make a motion that we go as fast as we can to add additional providers because one provider is obviously not doing it well enough.
Madam Mayor?
Let me just say, let's just, yeah. I'm very sorry that it happened, Vice Mayor, and we will proceed. With that, Commissioner Bernard, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I know you have a timeline in regards to opening this up. This one provider or with AMR Medics is not working. We need a quicker timeline to bring the additional COPC in. I believe that we need to have something before the end of this year. And so for me, I just believe that we need to do this ASAP and we need it on the street. And, you know, I don't want to hear about all the other things that cannot be done, but this is important. This is a matter of the welfare of our residents, and we needed to do it immediately. So I support the Vice Mayor's motion, and I just would love for us as a group, as a body, to determine how quickly we're going to put this out.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Mr. Butler, can you respond to Commissioner Bernard's
So if we
inquiry?
could, I mean, maybe just
Your
to-
timeline,
Yeah.
we need a
Yeah.
quicker timeline, and we need it.
Mayor.
So-
Hold on. Commissioner Woodward, did you want to interrupt and say something in this regard? All right, I'm gonna allow you to do that. Go right ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to, I wasn't on the board when this was voted the first time, and as I understand, you know, at the time, AMR and Medics were supposedly two different companies, so we weren't sole sourcing this, but they have since become one. We only have one. And in my opinion, it's not a legal opinion, that's an extenuating circumstance that should give us the right to expedite this process. It's our ordinance, and it wasn't, even when it was voted on 3 years ago, there were two, and now they've become one, and I would like to know legally, does that give us any grounds to expedite this? Because that's not what was intended at the time, and that is what we have.
Okay, could I have an opinion from the county attorney?
Yeah, right now, the EMS ordinance only has that 6-year application period, but we're prepared to, you know, meet quickly and revise the ordinance to allow an additional application period if that's the board's direction.
So today, then, legally, all right, on the questions of, first of all, I believe there's two questions, correct me if I'm incorrect, but one, whether there is a public safety need for additional secondary COPCNs here, and the second issue to be resolved is whether the EMS ordinance, which is a 6-year licensing timeline, needs to be amended or revised to allow for additional secondary ALS transport services. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so with that in mind, I think unless the board has any reason to hear a staff report, does anybody wish to have the staff report at this time? I think we are pretty much adamant about where this wants to go. So I'm going to open up the board. We can. How many cards do we have, Commissioner Weiss? The question I'm going to ask the board is, should we hear the cards first and then go into a discussion? Of course, if anybody has an issue right now, we can bring it up. Okay, so let's do this. Let's, we have 11 cards. Commissioner Moreno, can you do the time? Do you feel like?
We can. Better be in support, that's all I can say.
Okay. Set the clock for 3 minutes. And when you're ready, wait a minute, just 1 second. Okay, very good. Commissioner Weiss, go ahead and read the cards, sir.
All right, I'm going to call out 4 names at a time, so you can split up and go to the 2 different lecterns. That will be Alberto Naranjo, Elijah Virgin, Ken West, and Jason Kimbrell.
Okay. Gentlemen, we have two podiums. So I heard 4 names. I see 2 people. The other 2 will be excused unless you can come on up, folks. Very good. Thank you. Sir, you're recognized. State your name and your company, and the clock will start.
Thank you, Madam. Am I on? Okay.
You're on.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and the Commissioners. My name is Elijah Virgin. I am the EMS liaison for Palm Beach Health Network. That's the tenant hospitals in Palm Beach County. From north to south, that's Palm Beach Gardens, St. Mary's, Good Samaritan, Delray Medical Center, and West Boca Medical Centers. We work with AMR on a daily basis at all of our facilities. We just wanted to make sure that it was known from our review of data supplied by AMR. We support having more access for capacity of private ambulances in this county. So another company, if that would be the fix, we support that, and we are supportive of the EMS Advisory Council's recommendation as well.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
Thank
If
you.
any commissioners have any questions for any of the speakers, put your lights on. But right now, I don't see any lights on. Thank you, sir. Sir, come on up, state your name.
Jason Kimbrell, I'm a resident of Jupiter Farms. I'm represented today. I'm Jason Kimbrell, Chief Executive Officer for HCA Florida Palms West Hospital. Also with me is Ken West. Our 3 hospitals are the 3 hospitals within Palm Beach County that HCA operates. Nearly 184,000 patients enter our ER each and every day that oftentimes require transports, just like Commissioner Marino spoke about earlier. I'd be remiss without acknowledging this is a very challenging county to operate EMS services. With nearly 20 years prior to HCA, I served as an EMS chief, flight paramedic, firefighter paramedic. This is very challenging. The fact that we have, I believe, the world's greatest fire rescue division across the state of Florida, and I've worked in 6 counties, that is providing the stability right now. AMR's got a tough job. Across Florida, where HCA operates, in these types of similar situations, HCA has been successful in adding value to the system by operating under a limited COPCN that would allow our hospital systems under a limited COPCN to mobilize an ambulance. Just like Commissioner Moreno, in your scenario, we would be able to mobilize and transport. And as you all, it seems like it's fairly unanimous at this point, we would ask that you consider the opportunity for healthcare systems within our community to operate a limited COPCN in addition to any other general COPCNs that you may consider. For that, thank you so very much. Appreciate it.
Sorry, hold on just 1 second. I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you represent a hospital, Palms West?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And sir, do you have your own transport system there at the hospital presently that is operated by the hospital?
No, ma'am. We're 100% dependent upon AMR. When we have a critical transport need, just like in Commissioner Marino's scenario, we are held captive of AMR. And unfortunately, that's a tough spot to be in. And so for us, we would go through the standard process to receive a COPCN, get a license with the state of Florida, Bureau of EMS, and operate an ALS and BLS ambulance, which is consistent with what we've done in various different parts of the state of Florida today, adding value to the overall system, making the community as a whole safer.
Very good. Hold on just 1 second, sir. Vice Mayor Marino.
Thank you, Mayor. When you talk about a limited COPCN, you're talking about transporting between your facilities, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
But is there anything beyond that?
It would simply be the emergent transports, as in your unfortunate situation. And when we have a patient on the floor that needs to be moved to a skilled nursing facility, or if it's a pediatric patient that needs to go to Orlando for cancer care, we would be able to mobilize that immediate transport to move that patient out of the floor, off the floor to the next level of care, and then allow another patient to come up from the emergency room. Just makes the overall system flow.
So then, in fact, it's not just between your 3 hospitals. There are opportunities or reasons where you might move somebody somewhere else.
Yes, ma'am. It could be to an LTAC. It could be to St. Mary's, just like in your scenario. It could be to a behavioral health facility as well. It can be outside the area to Miami for cancer care. Those types of situations, which is really the biggest void right now as we see it, those immediate and emergent transports for which operating a limited COPCN or healthcare systems within the county, having that ability would overall strengthen the overall county from a public safety perspective.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Bernard, hold on just one second. Sir, just in case any commissioner has a question for you.
Oh, absolutely.
All right, Commissioner Bernard, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Stephanie and Todd, I'd like to, I don't understand this world. You know, some people can't even say COPCN right. So Jason mentioned this limited COPCN. How does that work? Would that work for our county? And the reason why I'm asking this question is I'm thinking from a hospital's perspective. If I'm a hospital and I have a patient that I need to transport, and, you know, for matter of safety, life, the welfare of that patient, I need to get that patient, our citizens, to another facility. So right now, we've created a, ordinance that says that that hospital's got to rely on this third-party person to transport that individual. How does that work, and how can we do something better that doesn't hold that hospital to, waiting on someone to make that decision, or is it by bringing additional other providers, will that help?
Yeah. So under the current ordinance, any hospital could apply for a COPCN and be a transport provider. But right now, if they wanted to come in, the only opportunity to do that, we would have to amend the ordinance. And there is opportunity in the pilot program area where we could expand upon that. Right now, it allows for innovation to be introduced into this county for services that are under a municipal or a county fire rescue department. We could expand upon that. I would caution, though, on expanding it too broad, because then that means that any time, a provider, healthcare provider in general, could come in, and I'm not sure if this board wants to see that at any time. I might limit it to, say, just hospitals, but again, I would want to also vet this through the EMS Council, this change. This is definitely something that, we've talked about as far as our EMS ordinance revision and expanding opportunities for innovation. But I don't know if you recall, years ago, we did modify the ordinance to allow for the healthcare district as a governmental hospital to provide interfacility transports. So there is potential. It's just, again, using the EMS Council and working with the industry, all the users of the system, to making sure that, whatever cascading effect there will be, whether positive or negative, this board has that information to make that decision.
Follow-up, Madam Mayor?
No, go right ahead.
So
Workshop.
would this be something that you could take to if the board gives you the direction, and working with the EMS Council and the hospitals and some of the providers, we can take a look at that?
Definitely.
Okay. Thank you, Madam.
Commissioner Woodward, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of questions. I'm not sure if this will be staff or for you. With the limited COPCN, you mentioned about taking patients from your hospital to another facility or back to their nursing home. Is there any option for reverse? If there's someone in a nursing home or someone who maybe needs to come for a procedure at the hospital, would you pick them up and bring them to your hospital instead of having to use AMR or whoever this would be?
Certainly, if that latitude is allowed through the licensure or the COPCN, which you all would be able to modify that, certainly. And I appreciate the acknowledgement of how important throughput is and getting patients to the next level of care, because that is important. The life-saving injuries and movement of patients is what kind of catches your heart immediately, but there's a lot of emotion in moving patients from one part of their care plan to the next, and if you allow that, certainly we would look into that as well.
So as this is for staff, we have, is it 14 hospitals? Is it 16 hospitals and 3 overall systems that they're a part of? Or it's
So there's
Tenet,
private,
HCA,
Tenet, HCA,
and Baptist.
Baptist.
Are those the 3 big ones?
Mary, is there any others that I missed? Well, private.
Jupiter.
Oh, okay. Oh, and UHS.
UHS?
Or Wellington, or Wellington.
Oh, that got bigger. So if we were to open this up to allow hospitals, how quickly do you think you could, going through the process, but how quickly would you be able to start this service if it were allowed?
Yes, ma'am. Referencing how we've done it just recently in North Florida, we did it in St. Lucie County. We've got the template to be able to do this. Because we're not going to be standing up 40 ambulances, we're going to be focusing in on these 3 primary hospitals within HCA, which does represent 184,000 ER visits, or 8.1% of the population. We could get it up just out of experience that we've seen in the last 12 months. Less than 12 months, we would have a system supporting the overall network.
Thank you.
Another question to follow up on this discussion. Presently, though, hospitals do not have COPCNs to transport emergent patients from one facility to another. For example, from Palms West to St. Mary's or to Delray, which, because they're trauma. So hospitals do not have that right now. Is that correct, Stephanie, also?
That is correct.
That's correct. We would have to do an ordinance change or revision in order to allow a hospital to get up to speed. Y'all don't have it right now anyways.
No, ma'am. I would just point to precedent on the healthcare district.
Okay.
Stephanie? If I may clarify. So as part of the ordinance, the 6-year timeline, any hospital during that timeline, that when we open up the application process, they could apply for a COPCN.
Have any
no
of
hospital
applied?
other than the healthcare district has applied.
And the healthcare district has that.
Correct.
But that takes care of one hospital.
Correct.
Lakeside?
Correct.
that's-
So if they
We
wanted,
have numerous other hospitals here.
yes.
Okay.
But if they wanted to do something immediately, the ordinance doesn't allow for that. So we would have to modify the language in the ordinance for them to do it outside of the current COPCN term,
And it
which
would-
ends June 30th of 2027.
Right. But we would also need time for the hospitals to get up to speed, to get these trucks, these ambulances ready and going. And we could also say only for emergency care. That is not between one nursing home and another, so that we could open it up to other applications, right? Okay, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
So much.
Thank you. Sir, you're recognized. State your name.
Thank you. My name is Alberto Naranjo. I'm here representing eCare Ambulance. Just want to say thank you to Madam Mayor and the commissioners. I want to echo everybody's comments. We do support opening it up. eCare is owned by a resident here in Palm Beach County, and he has taken his expertise to Monroe County. And what we've seen is the same story that's going on here. We've seen a success story in the sense that the quality and the timing of transports has increased. When we first got to Monroe County, the wait time was over an hour. At this point, our ETAs are about 19 minutes. On top of that, there's been good equipment, better services. I think competition just opens it up to have better services all around. The only thing I would point out that wasn't talked about so far is that the county's growing. There's many hospitals coming into the county, not just HCA. There's about 4 different hospitals that are planning to come to the county very soon. There's Baptist, Universal Health Services, Jupiter Medical Center, NYU. They all plan to open up new facilities here. And I think that with new facilities and more growth, I think you need more vendors to support the need that's already here in Palm Beach County. Thank you.
Sir. I have a question. Who's the owner of your company who lives here in Palm Beach County?
It's Mr. Serrano's. He's sitting over here. He's been a resident for over 7 years. He's operated transport companies in Palm Beach County as well.
And the second question is, how many hospitals are in Monroe County?
Right now, there's Baptist and Lower Keys Hospital. Monroe County is a little bit of a different...
2 or 3?
Yes.
Okay.
2, yeah.
Thank you, sir.
No worries.
Sir, you're recognized. Give us your name.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Mayor and Commissioners. I'm Ken West. I'm the CEO of JFK Hospital based in Atlantis. I'm a resident of the Pine Tree community in West Boynton as well. I would like to just echo the comments of my colleague and add a little context to our system as well. We talk about the hospitals also, and we do have 3 here in Palm Beach County. But we also do have 2 freestanding emergency rooms and plan to add more in the future, as well as ambulatory surgery centers and about 24 urgent care centers. You know them under the name of MD Now. And so to have this ability along with dozens of physician clinics gives us the ability and flexibility here in this market. For us, we see about 28,000 admissions here in the county just at our hospital at JFK Main proper. It's the largest hospital in Palm Beach County and the busiest. We also treat about 22,000 patients who are brought to us via EMS, and we see about 90,000 emergency room visits as well. And so we recognize that we create a lot of the demand on the system. And so our goal is to make sure that we are part of the solution of adding capacity to the system as well to make sure patients get transported. You may not have a full appreciation for a lot of our systems, but we oftentimes bifurcate or stratify services across those facilities as well. So in Jason's case, he has obstetrics and pediatrics. A lot of your high-end tertiary complex surgery for adults takes place at the JFK Main campus, and psychiatric care takes place at JFK our North campus of the hospital. So constantly we're moving patients throughout our system all day long, and because we don't offer trauma services here, we have to many times stabilize patients at JFK and transfer those out to either Delray or St. Mary. So we emphatically support the opening of the COPCN, and I'll yield back the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Questions? Okay. Go right ahead, Commissioner Weiss.
Okay, next 4 is going to be Yaima Acosta, I hope I pronounced that correct, Neil Schiller, Edward Badamo, and Fred Angelo.
Okay, if you heard your name, I see 3 or 4 names and two people. Is there anybody else? If you could read that name one more time. First one.
I think it's Yaima Acosta.
Okay, Mr. Costa? Okay. Very good. Come on up, state your name, and your time will begin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, Commissioners. My name is Yaima Costa. I am the Director of Operations for AMR Medics, and I would like to just thank you for hearing us today. And Commissioner Marino, I am deeply sorry for your experience, and I would make myself available to have a conversation with you and privately to make sure that this does not occur again. So thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Acosta. Mr. Schiller.
Good morning, Madam Mayor, Commissioners, staff. My name is Neil Schiller with Government Law Group, 137 Northwest 1st Avenue in Delray Beach, Florida. I'm here today representing Elite Medical Response. Again, we support multiple companies like I think everybody else here would. But I think there is something in the code that you can take action now, and that is Section 1330 called Emergency Powers. If a situation exists which poses a serious or imminent threat to the public's health, safety, and/or welfare, or if necessary, based on exigent circumstances creating an urgent public need warranting intervention and action, the administrator shall have such temporary emergency powers as are necessary to remedy the situation. All such actions shall be reported immediately to the EMS Council. I think as policymakers, it's up to you whether or not such emergency exists, but that action clearly does allow you the opportunity if you find it. So again, we support very strongly opening this up as fast as possible and getting additional providers into the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schiller. So, Mr. Angelo, come on up. Give us a second. Okay, state your name, you're on.
Fred Angelo, a resident here in Palm Beach County, 16428 75th Avenue North, Palm Beach Gardens, 33418. Good morning. Sorry, Ms. Marino. I just want to say, I know most of you, 28 years I served here, as I echo Jason's comments of the world's greatest fire department, Palm Beach County Fire Rescue. And I spoke from this podium many times, and now I'm part of Elite Medical Response. And I recognize this need. I support that need. But I'd like to say we've implemented a few things already at Elite that would prevent some of these things. Like, we have cameras inside the truck that turn on automatically when an employee lifts up their phone or brakes too hard or is speeding over 10 miles an hour over the speed limit. And it alerts us automatically. We have a safety person who can contact the person inside the truck, actually all patrons of the truck, to make sure that we're operating in a safe manner. We also put these brush guards on in case our truck's going in a rural area like west of Palm Beach County here out to the Glades, and a big hog or a deer or something were to get there. It's not going to enter into the vehicle. It'll stay on the outside. And so those are things that you need to do when you're thinking about it. We also are prepared to come to Palm Beach County with 30 units right now, and we could get started tomorrow. So we emphatically support doing that. We're a local group. We know Palm Beach County. I know Palm Beach County. I know all the players in Palm Beach County, and we're ready to start operating right away. So we thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Mr. Angelo.
All right, one last time, Edward Madamo. Guess they're not here. Okay, next. Brett Jovanovich, Charles Maimon, and Ron Klein.
Okay, we have Congressman Klein and sir, let me see. Who's it, sir, to the left? What's your name? Charles Maimon. Come on up, Mr. Maimon.
Mayor, Commissioners, good
Hold on
afternoon.
just 1 second. Go right ahead, sir, you're on.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners, good afternoon. I'm speaking on behalf of MCT Express Incorporated, doing business as All County Ambulance. In 2021, our organization was vetted and recommended by the EMS Council to be a provider in Palm Beach County. I wanted to, first of all, say to you that we appreciate your position in this, and that our organization in 2021 was prepared. Currently, our organization serves 27 counties in Florida. Basically, we blanket the East Coast from Monroe County up to Duval County, actually as far north as Nassau County. We have 280 vehicles licensed by the state of Florida, and we are prepared to step in immediately. We have the vehicles, the depth of management, and we have all of what is necessary to get the job done immediately for Palm Beach County in a safe manner. We were prepared in 2021, and we're prepared to do it today. And we just want you to understand that we are very immediately prepared to step in. We are, we're on to the south, we're in Broward County, and then, Dade and Monroe to the south, and certainly we go Martin, St. Lucie, Indian River, and north into Central Florida and northern Florida from there. Thank you for your time.
I have a couple of questions, Mr. Maimon. You said Monroe County. I heard from a company here who's, Mr. Sedano lives here in Palm Beach County, that he also covers Monroe County. How many, does Monroe County have a couple of COPCNs?
Commissioner, they have quite a few. Mayor, I'm sorry. They have quite a few COPCNs out in Monroe County. Yes, ma'am.
And another question I have for you is, you were operating here in 2021? Is that correct?
We had, in 2021, our organization applied to be a provider here in Palm Beach County. We put the application in. We were vetted, and there were 4 applications, actually there were 5 applications, including the healthcare district at the time. There were 4 other private providers that applied. Of the 4 other private providers that applied, our organization was the only one that was vetted and approved by the EMS Council.
Very good. Thank you, sir. If there's no other questions, then we can proceed to the next card. I think this is the last card. Is that correct?
It is.
Commissioner? Okay, we're going to start the clock when you Come on up, Congressman, go right ahead.
Hi.
Hi.
Good afternoon.
Good
Good morning. Nice to see everyone. My name is Ron Klein. I'm representing AMR Medics. First of all, of course, what happened that Vice Mayor Marino mentioned should not happen under any set of circumstances by any company. So we will look into it, and we do apologize for that, of course. Beyond that, I would also mention that there is no record of a quality problem with the AMR transports. Obviously, what happened, and if it happens, it can't happen, but there is no record, and so the emergency that's being presented here is not an emergency. It's something that, to the extent, and AMR certainly supports, if you decide you want more of another provider, if you want HCA's model, we support that. That's fine. I mean, it just adds value to the overall county's operations here. We also listened to the paratransit presentation a few minutes ago, and there was a lot of detail about how you would construct best practices or the best model possible. And there are a number of issues that we think, should be considered. We would support, the study that goes forward. And if the county has already studied this, that's fine. But, what's the level of the number of providers that would make sense? What are the models that are used in other parts of Florida, other parts of the country with fast growth counties? How will multiple providers interface with the fire department? What's the fire department's view of this topic? Knowing there are shortages of healthcare workers in the county, which we've heard from everybody, is it just one? It's not that there are more healthcare workers that are going to man ambulances. AMR currently absorbs about $2 million annually of uncompensated care. They take care of everybody who comes forward. So how's that going to be divided up? If you have multiple districts, some people suggested that idea. How is one area, which is a larger population that has less insurance and things like that, going to compare to a place that has more insurance? Who's going to want to make up the difference on those kinds of things? How will the central dispatch be handled? Those kinds of issues. How do you avoid multiple providers cherry picking insurance customers versus other customers? This is something that has to be set up for every single resident of Palm Beach County to have these kinds of things. And by the way, I'm not here to suggest that multiple providers can't do that. I'm just saying this needs to be modeled out, and you need to be thinking about how all these things go forward. So again, the point of all this is that, just like the county does every other procurement arrangement, there needs to be a process. This is serious. This is something that you're all expressing the seriousness, and we agree it is serious. At the same time, it's a serious system that has to be thought through, and you want best practices to move forward. There's another COPCN coming up in 2026 for 2027. There's certainly an opportunity to add another one right now, just to, if you feel it's necessary, we support that. That's perfectly fine, and as I said, HCA's model is fine as well. But we also think that it would be important to take the time with the staff and with the providers and with maybe look outside the county to see what the best practice model would be.
Thank you so much, Congressman.
Thank you.
Any questions? Yes, we do. Vice Mayor Marino. Okay, you can.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner, Vice
I
Mayor
do have
Marino,
a comment,
you have
yes.
a comment.
Sadly, our hospital administrators did not fill out the forms and did not give us the responses. But as somebody that was sitting in an emergency room and listening to the nurses comment on, wow, we only have to wait an hour, that's really good, that's disturbing. Looking at the numbers, when there's supposed to be a percentage, the numbers actually show that AMR's response time was not as good as it's supposed to be. And this is what you've supplied us. And I can't remember which one it was, but I went through it, and out of the 44 examples you gave us, 25% were below the 90% rate. So I'm sorry, I very rarely take a business to task in a public forum. But for AMR to say that there are no problems, that is categorically wrong. The fact that our hospital administrators now, even yesterday when we got something from Tenet talking about the response times, I think because the hospital administrators are hearing that there is a rumbling that people are unhappy, they're not afraid now to respond. They did not want to respond, and this I've heard, and I will not say who because it is a public forum, but they did not want repercussions for responding. That is not how you do business in this county. And Mr. Klein, you said something about how are we going to do this? Well, if it's done that we have multiple providers in other counties, I'm sure Palm Beach County, who is a leader in a lot of things, can figure it out here. And our staff has had 3 years to figure out how this new ordinance is going to be worked because 3 years ago, they knew the question was going to be posed this year. So I know our staff is doing their homework. I would have appreciated more hospitals responding, but sitting there in an emergency room, listening to the nurses, who are the ones who are actually feeling the pain, not the hospital administrators, but the people on the floor who are doing the service and trying to do it as best as they can, to say, oh, we only have to wait an hour, that's good. When my father's got a brain injury, that's not good. So however we can do this, and Mr. Klein, I will disagree with you when you say this is not an emergency. I think the board has the ability to say under emergency situations, we can do this. And I will look at our attorney. And I apologize for being so adamant. This is not normally my character up here, but it is personal. And it is something I experienced. And it is unacceptable that what I had to experience on Sunday, I had to experience. Now, thankfully, my father is home. But he was lucky. He was absolutely lucky. And I'm not putting another person in harm's way. So whatever we need to do under exigent circumstances or emergent, I don't even know the right word because I'm a little emotional at the moment. I think we as a board have the power to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Ms. Attorney.
Yeah, I just wanted to further discuss so the board has a full picture. You can amend the ordinance, like we said, to add additional providers, the ability to add additional providers, as long as there's a public safety need for it. Of course, declaring it an emergency and urgency, of course, just supports that, right? But I also wanted to make sure that you understood that there is a provision for the administrator to also suspend or modify a COPCN if she finds that there's a threat to public safety or welfare, and she can do that immediately while pending a public hearing by the board.
Okay, thank you. The way, and I'm speaking actually to you, the way I read the instructions on the agenda, which is public record for today, is that we have to decide whether there's a public safety need for additional secondary COPCN providers in the county. That's our first question. Then the second question that we need to provide today is whether the EMS ordinance 6-year licensing timeline needs to be amended or revised to allow for additional secondary ALS transport services. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
That was the request by staff, unless you have further direction.
No, I don't. It's all public what we have. But also you brought in the idea that if there is a finding of fact that there was a public safety need to revise or amend the ordinance, that can be found by the administrator, and then there could be a public hearing on that?
That would be to amend a COPCN or to revoke a COPCN temporarily.
License, okay.
If she finds that there is a threat to public safety or welfare while it's pending, then it would come before the board at a public hearing.
Okay, very good. Okay, so we're going to discuss those two issues that we went over today, and thank you for that. Commissioner Bernard, then Commissioner Woodward.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I know for me, I don't support revoking the COPCN that AMR currently is operating under. We would need more information for us to do that. But I do believe that we've met the requirement that there is a public safety need for us to bring in an additional provider or providers immediately. So my motion would be for us to add additional providers based on the public safety need, and also for us to amend the 6-year requirement to for the EMS council and staff to work on to bring back amended the COPCN for us to add additional providers. But I do believe that we do need to add the additional providers immediately right now. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Commissioner Bernard, I just have to question. The second issue that you were answering is whether the 6-year licensing timeline. Do you have a recommendation on that, sir?
Madam Mayor, I believe that I'd love for staff, if we can bring something by before the end of this year.
Stephanie?
Yes, we could bring something back to this board. If you want to flip to the timeline, Mary, that we had, we can push those dates up. And I was just kind of quickly going through, as long as it's within our legal power to do so. I know there's timelines associated within the ordinance that outlines when we can post the application, how many days it has to be posted. So those are things that, again, trying to move it aggressively along as quickly as possible, those are changes that we would have to make to the ordinance. I think what we had asked for direction on as far as amending the ordinance would then allow for an opportunity to add providers at that time, which would then still have to come back to this board for review and approval and go through the EMS council and all the other parties that we work with. So
Very good. Okay. Just want to make it specific. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Commissioner Woodward, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry, I'm jumping back a little, but I will say do we now have a path to be able to allow applications for additional COPCNs before amending the ordinance?
no.
We do not.
Unless we go under, I don't know if, I'm
yeah,
going to
there is
refer
kind
to
of-
our attorney because the emergency powers section, I don't know if it qualifies for that.
There are broad powers, obviously, to remedy in whatever way is possible if there's a serious or imminent threat to the public health and safety. So if it rose to that level and you made that finding, then there is the ability for the administrator to do whatever is needed to remedy that.
Well, my concern is, and Vice Mayor Marino brought up this survey, that, there were only 4 questions asked, and we got, a 43% response from hospitals and 13% from other facilities, and they didn't even answer every question. So in order for us to actually be able to say whether or not this, legally, that this is, I would expect the hospitals, and there are some in this room, and I don't know whether or not they participated, but, they need to answer this. They need to tell us. And if there's fear to not answer, that's very disconcerting. And I think everyone in this county should be concerned with that. If there's any fear of repercussions from any union or anything, and I've heard a lot over the past couple of weeks about this disturbing to me, because at the end of this, there's patients sitting in facilities waiting to be moved. And there's this whole notion of being on time because of contracted times. And I've asked, and I've asked, and I've asked, and no one can give me a straight up answer. How long is the contracted time? I want to know, not are you within 10 minutes of the deal that was made when you told them they could get there in 4 hours? That person's still sitting there for 4 hours. So this notion of on time because you negotiated a longer time does not give us the answers that we should be making decisions on. So I guess that we can't declare this a state of emergency or however this would be, but hospitals and facilities that use this service, you need to answer. You need to answer us and tell us what's really going on here. And so that we can make a good decision on this, and that, we're not being like a knee-jerk reaction to something that we think or stories that we're told. It can't be anecdotal. You need to answer us. So I don't know what we can do about that, but this needs to move forward, and they need to answer.
Okay, so I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, going forward with Commissioner Bernard's last statement, and also Commissioner Woodward's concern and recognizing the personal turmoil that our Vice Mayor went through. I'm looking at staff and at our council. I would like to see a report back as speedily as possible with regard to the public safety need for additional COPCNs. We have, I believe, a number of applications that have already been submitted. I know it's not just our staff, but we also have to deal with the, we call the EMS staff, that the council that needs to convene on this. And then we need to hear from the hospitals. I mean, I was very pleased to hear from Palms West and from JFK. And I didn't even know that we had a resident here that had this business going on. So this is good. This is a good thing that happened today, because now we're going to open it up and we're going to find out what the hospitals are requesting pursuant to Commissioner Woodward's request, and also according to Commissioner Bernard's request that we look at these. The data that we've been submitted and make sure that it is correct. We have so many hospitals, we have such a large county geographically that we really need to take a deep dive into what should our COPC and secondary transports need to be. But we need a change. Commissioner Weiss, you want to say something? Go right ahead.
Right. Thank you, Mayor. So first off, I don't object to anything that my colleagues have requested. But here's one thing that I've been thinking about as because I've had a lot of people coming in talking to me about this. The system that we have, which is really not a real system, a dispatch system, where, I mean, I've said this before, I get an alert on my phone when my cats use their litter box. But why can't the hospitals see where these vehicles are that are available and be able to request the one that's closest to them to be the one that comes and does that? I mean, every vehicle today has a smartphone, which they should not have been using in that while they were transporting your father. But every one of those has a GPS in them. They know where they're at. So I think that the whole thing needs to be modernized in a way that really serves our users, serves our stakeholders. I mean, I understand, some things are not life-threatening, and it's trying to get somebody back to the next step in their program, and it's not life-threatening. But you also have, and we heard about it today, where it is life-threatening. It shouldn't take a hospital calling down a list of numbers to find the closest person, because they may not get to that next person. Somebody said, I'll be there in 20 minutes. Well, now they're waiting 20 minutes for them to show up. Well, at 15 minutes, maybe there was somebody that could have been there in 10. But they'll never find that out, and that could have been somebody else's life. And I think we needed, the whole thing, I think, needs to be looked at and how we really provide a system of care for folks.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments by the board to the staff? Mr. Bonlarian, you're recognized.
Yes, if we could just want to sum this up a little bit and make sure that we repeat to you what we've heard so that we're very clear about the direction that we're moving in and that we can get that acknowledgement from you, if that's okay. Stephanie, you want to?
Yes, so thank you, Todd. So what I'm hearing is that we don't want to currently suspend or revoke a license of the current COPCN holder. They will maintain status. We are to bring back to this board a revised ordinance, which will have already been vetted by the EMS Council, to allow for, to establish criteria to allow for additional providers to apply during the mid-year, outside of the 6-year period.
I'm sorry, when is the mid-year period?
Mid-year as in, we're in the current 6-year
Okay, good.
timeline.
I was thinking next year. Okay, good. So now, all right.
I would ask, and maybe this is a discussion of the board, is this a one-time, or is this something that you want included ongoing to allow for a mid-year, say, the next cycle that we enter into?
If I may,
So,
the second issue that you wanted us to give you direction on is the 6-year licensing timeline. So why don't we What, you're shaking your head.
Yeah,
Tell me,
no.
Stefan, let's have a conversation.
Yeah, so the opening, allowing for, modifying the timeline right now to allow for almost another application process to go through, the COPCN, would allow for a new provider to come in now, within the next 6 months or whenever, as soon as possible. That is already modifying the 6-year timeline. So the 6-year.
We're already doing that.
So we wouldn't do it again.
Okay, good,
Yeah.
good.
And it would obviously be done as we identify the public safety need.
Very good.
But the question has come up, because we've discussed this over the last several years, we knew we were going to have to present this to the board, and the discussion has come up, do we want this one time, or do you want this something that's ongoing? Because again, there's going to be another cycle of 6 years, and so
Okay.
what we want that to look like moving forward, it would be helpful to get direction.
Okay, there's a number of lights on, but
And
go
I
ahead.
can share
Tom.
something with you too, because there's going to be 2 cracks at the ordinance with the Board of County Commissioners here the next couple of years. We currently have a series of revisions that we're taking through the process right now that will come back to you before the 6-year license is opened
Correct.
up in a couple of years from now. We can move forward with sort of the immediate direction now to
Yeah.
deal with what you've asked us now. And as we're going through the revision process on some of the other language that's cleaning up the ordinance, we can come back and have a deeper dive on maybe a question like that as well, if that's something that you want beyond that 6-year period. So that way we can
Before
focus
we answer that,
on-
I'm going to, and I'm sure that the lights that are on are going to respond to these issues. So let me start with Commissioner Bernard.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is we would probably need to have a conversation with the EMS Council and some of the providers because, you know, if we approve, let's say, a contract for 6 years, then whoever's that, let's say what's important is that we need to approve, you know, multiple providers, because I looked at this list, like in some of these other smaller counties, they have 5, 6 different providers. And so what I'm hoping is that if we approve multiple providers in the future, then we may not need to open it up like mid-year in the future. Because, you know, what you do want to make sure is if you approve somebody for 6 years, then they know exactly that, hey, we can buy trucks and we would have it for 6 years. But if you're opening it up mid-year, then it may impact that business from being able to purchase trucks and all that kind of stuff. So it's a conversation that we can have later, but that's my thought process.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Woodward.
Thank you, Mayor. I think that we should provide ourselves the option for a 3-year addition, just because there's the potential for mergers and acquisitions where if we have multiple providers, they get bought up by a larger company or they decide to merge, we're back down to fewer providers again. So I think that we should leave ourselves the option to add, especially with that potential.
Thank you, Commissioner. Vice Mayor Marino?
I think the board should avail itself of any ability to do performance reviews, whether it's mid-year or mid-cycle, I should say, because we're taking everybody's life in our hands. That's what we're doing. This is really, really important to a lot of people. And if the hospitals choose to not respond, then you know what? We should assume the worst. Because if they were happy, they'd be responding. If they're not happy, they're not responding. So in my humble opinion, without any scientific knowledge, for those hospitals that didn't respond, they didn't respond because they weren't happy. Now they can, you know what? They can respond now and tell me I'm wrong. I challenge every single hospital out there of our network to respond now. Challenge me. Am I right or am I wrong? Were you happy? Were you not? Because if we don't have enough information, then again, we're not doing the right thing here. So I challenge all those hospitals that didn't respond. Please do so now. I think it's incumbent on us to do this properly. We shouldn't be revoking anybody's license because we can't be at any point in time have no service. But you know, the question that now begs asking is, okay, if we do this and the folks that sign on now, is it for 3 years or for 6 years? That, that is part of the discussion. But you've had staff and you've had 3 years you knew this was coming. So I'm sure you have contingencies as to whether we deem this an emergency or we go through a correct vetting process and do it as quickly as possible. I do not want this to take 1.5 years to add additional providers. That is totally unacceptable. This is something that should be expedited. We know from other counties that they have other providers, so it's obviously being done. Monroe County is from pillar to post has a lot of distance and not easy traffic between one island and another. And if they can do it with multiple providers, I don't see why Palm Beach County, who has a good network, can't do it with multiple providers. So I think expedience is important. And I think, and shame on all those hospitals that haven't answered. Your time is now to answer the survey. Thank you.
Okay, it looks like we've got some pretty good direction. I just want to bring in what Commissioner Weiss added, and that is technology with regard. I mean, we know where our Uber is when he's on his way to pick us up. We did that with Palm Tram. We need to get in the 21st century, so let's use that also as a determining factor when we're looking at applications for secondary COPCNs. Madam Administrator, do we have any issues with promoting and pushing this to a pretty fast conclusion on this?
This is a different set of staff that's available to work on that. So, no, we do not. We heard you loud and clear. We will consider this like an emergency and move forward, working in conjunction with EMS council along with the providers and hospitals, because I will reach out to our hospital administrators. We have our own little connection there, so I will reach out to them for their input.
If a hospital refuses, I want to know, it says refusal.
They have been very cooperative with me in the past.
I'm sure they'll be cooperative now. Very good. Commissioner Woodward, you had your light on.
Thank you. One more thing I did want to note, as you're working on the ordinance, which would be the next part of this, you had a slide, page 12, which was the survey that on response times. And again, I don't mean to harp on this, but it seems like that part just keeps sort of getting overlooked when we're having the metrics for us to make judgments as contracted times or any of this stuff. But if you look at that slide, the 7 hospitals that answered, 3, what is your average response times for April 2023? 3 were unknown, 4 skipped the question. There are only 7 that answered, and they didn't answer that. And it seems to me that the response times, in my opinion, are about the most important thing that we're dealing with here, because people need to be moved. So that, as we go forward with the ordinance, if that works with, metrics that we measure, or, however it works to decide the success or failure of a license, I would like that added.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Commissioner Woodward. We're going to close this discussion with how we started it, and that's with Vice Mayor Marino.
Yeah. Going back to the hospital administrators, the only way they can answer this question is if they actually talk to the staff. They talk to the people on the ground. They talk to the nurses and the doctors in the ER. They talk to the nurses and the doctors that are transporting people that are requesting transport. We've heard a lot of reasons why a scheduled time gets changed. That, a lot of times it's, well, the patient wasn't ready. And then the hospital says, well, they didn't give us the right time, so the patient didn't get ready. So this is, I don't want a chicken or the egg thing. I want the administrators to be speaking to their staff, because their staff, the people on the ground, are the only ones that really have the true response time. And I mean, I was sitting in an emergency room with someone who had no idea who I was. And she gave me her very honest opinion and said, oh, we only have to wait an hour. That's great. That doesn't give me a lot of security. So.
Madam Mayor, if I just may add just 2 quick things. One, on the slide that I put up there on slide 13, I just want to point out to you, where it says hospital feedback.
Yes, sir.
We have a survey that we provided, but our staff has been talking to some of those hospitals. We have had conversations with them as well. So just for the purpose of that, I want you to be aware that we have had discussions with hospitals. They've been forthcoming, and we've shared that with you in the slide about some of the feedback, albeit not written in the survey, but some of the information that we provided you here. So I do want to let you know that staff has been having that contact with some of those administrators, maybe not all of them, but a good number that we've been able to kind of support, I think, what you're asking us to do here. The final thing that I did want to share is just for expediting this, when we were coming back with the ordinance revision that you're requesting for opening this up, the new COPCNs would be for the duration of this existing 6-year period that we're in, not a 6-year COPCN within that. So you'd have this emergency ordinance that we would go through the revision, bring back that for additional COPCN licenses. And then when that 6-year period is up, meaning that started 3 years ago, then the whole system would open up for everyone to be able to apply at that time, which would be about, I just wanted to make that
understand, and that's what's stated
Okay.
in your explanation and support,
thank
too.
you.
So we'll go by that. Commissioner Barnett.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. I think this board is being asked to make a determination of an emergency. And shouldn't such a finding be based? No?
No, we have not. After listening to our council, the steps towards declaring that there is an emergency situation pursuant to that ordinance, we are not stating that today. We are just going forward on finding and opening up
But not today, but at some
application
point.
processes. Yes, sir.
Not today, but at some point. Is that correct?
It may be, if there is a finding of fact pursuant to the statute, that there's a public safety emergency. I was always thinking, and I'm looking at Mr. Schiller, who's also an attorney, I was always thinking this could be something like a hurricane or some, force majeure or something. But I don't think we really have a finding of fact on that. No, I am sure we do not. Today, we're doing exactly what we have been requested to do on those two issues.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. If there's nothing other before this issue, I want to thank you, staff, very much, and I want to thank all the applications, all the applicants who have come before us and discussed this with us. Personally, I think we've all been educated on an issue, and I want to say publicly I'm very sorry what occurred to the Marino family, and this is part of who we are as a family. It should never happen to anybody in Palm Beach County. We're going to work hard to make it better. Thank you very much. Thank you. So if there's no other issues, I'm going to open this up to our comments from the board, and I'm going to start with Commissioner Barnett. No comments? Commissioner Woodward?
Thank you, and I'd just like to thank everyone that reached out to me and my family at the loss of my mother-in-law last week, and also for the happy birthday wishes. It's good to be back, and I hit the ground running with this board. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Weiss.
Thank you, Mayor. At the August 22nd zoning meeting, we considered an item SV/CA 2024-00590, also known as Project Charlie. The board voted in favor of postponing this item and bringing it back on September 26th meeting. It's my understanding that since last week's meeting, the issue that gave rise to the postponement have been addressed by staff and the applicant. Since time is of the essence, I would like to direct staff to bring this item back for consideration at the September 17th, 2024 regular meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. The public notice advertising requirements and the courtesy notice requirements can be met subject to the applicant covering that expense.
We have a second by the Vice Mayor.
It's just direction.
Okay.
So we're good.
Well, is there anybody opposed to giving staff direction? Seeing none, staff has now been given direction. 6-0.
Thank you. No other comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Bernard?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I just want to make sure from the county attorneys if that should be direction or should we make it a motion.
On what?
Because since we're changing the date, you know,
I think we're on the record. I'm not the attorney, but we're on the record, and you gave us a directive.
Okay.
So I don't think we need a motion.
thank you very much.
That's
no,
mine.
no further
Unlawful.
comments.
Too many lawyers.
I think let's just
We got a lot
let's
of
just
lawyers
make
here.
it. Let's just make it a motion.
We just did, 6-0. We did.
Thank
We have
you.
a first and a second per Commissioner Bernard. Put that down, Bernard. Okay, got that taken care of. Vice Mayor?
Thank you. At our last board meeting, we also talked about Jonathan Dickinson State Park and the failed attempt to add activity to that park. I do want to say thank you to our board for directing staff to write a letter. We actually were part of a letter. There were several letters, but Congressman Mast's office, along with Senator Rubio and Senator Scott, sent a letter, and I sent a personal letter, being the District 1 Commissioner, that included the Loxahatchee River, which Jonathan Dickinson borders. If anybody watched Facebook, they saw the tremendous outpouring that occurred since this got published, and it has been pulled. There's a lot of speculation about who it was that started it, but the only information that we need to be sure of right now is that at this point in time, it has been pulled. There will be, obviously, that's why I'm sitting here, because there is no meeting today, and there was a postponement until the first week in September, but that has been canceled. But what I would like to say is, a lot of times when something like this occurs, there's a couple of reasons for it, but I'm going to go with the reason that our parks are something that are important to all of us, and we need to support them. So if you've got something to do over the weekend, go to your parks, go to our state parks, go to our county parks. Avail yourselves of the opportunities there. If you want to support Jonathan Dickinson, there is a Friends of Jonathan Dickinson's. You can go ahead and support it. And no matter where you are in the state, go and visit the parks of where you are, because it's our use and it's our supporting those parks, and it's our contribution to those parks that helps to maintain them. We don't want to go to parks that aren't maintained well. We won't go. It's that vicious cycle. You don't go, it doesn't get maintained. So support our state and county parks, because that's the most important thing for us right now. And I think this was a whole nonpartisan answer to something that affected a lot of people, and everybody rose to the occasion. So I just want to say thank you and support your parks. Thanks.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Know that your mayor also joined, and others, in writing a letter objecting to that. So Palm Beach County is in that as well. I'd like to have permission from my colleagues to write a thank you letter to our Congresswoman Shefferlis McCormick, who came in today with that check, and I may even send a copy to our other congressional delegation starting. No. But maybe I will, by golly, because I think it was wonderful to see first her personal appearance here today, showing that she supports us and that she's part of our community, and not only with words, but with over $2 million. So I appreciate that, and if anybody objects, I see no objection. I'm going to go ahead and write that letter. So with that, Commissioner Baxter, we hope you get better, and join us again very soon. Thank you. The meeting is adjourned.